We are in the condition we are in the state of ignorance we are in the state of war, in the state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to Sott Talk Radio, the world for people who think.
Hello and welcome to Sott Talk Radio. Today is the 20th edition of our show. I'm your host, Neil Bradley, and joining me today are Scott Owen. Scott is the webmaster for Sottnet. Hi, folks. We've also got with us tonight Jason Martin. Word. And a special guest, Michael Franzel. Michael is an editor of Sottnet, and he's also an IT consultant. Hello. So, today's show, NASA PRISM for your mind. Well, NASA, well,
NSA.
It's not NASA, it's the NSA PRISM for your mind. Neither privacy nor security. So, as you probably heard by now, about 10 days ago, news broke that there was a big leak, big scandal. And it's been developing, gathering up steam over the last 10 days. And we just want to go back and just trace out where this started, and then get into some discussion on it. I'm sure a lot of you will have your thoughts as well. So you want to call in, send us a comment, let us know your thoughts on this NSA privacy scandal. So on June 6th, it was Thursday, The Guardian reports that the NSA is collecting the phone records of millions of Verizon customers daily. Verizon is a large telecoms company in the U.S.
Probably Verizon.
Verizon.
Yeah.
Verizon, okay. I think I've heard they have
It's one of the most popular American telecoms.
I think it's half.
Yeah, they have something like 150 million U.S. customers or something, and considering the population of the U.S., that's quite a number of customers. So
it's practically half the population.
Yeah,
wow.
they came out of nowhere when I was a teenager. You know, I had never heard of them before, and suddenly they were everywhere. So it was kind of a little bit suspicious thing about the company starting, and it's just like a mob bell killer kind of thing, you know.
So Verizon, the story in The Guardian is that a top secret court order had been issued in April, a copy of which was obtained by the Guardian newspaper in London, that, quote, requires Verizon on an ongoing daily basis to give the NSA information on all telephone calls in its systems, both within the U.S. and between the U.S. and other countries. The article goes on, the information is classed as metadata, or transactional information, rather than communications, and so does not require individual warrants to access. A 2005 court ruling judged that cell site location data, cell as in your cell phone, i.e. the nearest cell tower a phone was connected to, was also transactional data, and so could potentially fall under the scope of the order. The request for the bulk collection of all Verizon domestic phone records indicates that the agency is continuing some version of the data mining program begun by the Bush administration in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attack. The NSA, as part of a program secretly authorized by Bush on the 4th October 2001, implemented a bulk collection program of domestic telephone, internet, and email records. It didn't end there. After this announcement, well, I say after, it was the same day. Both of these stories came out on the same day. The Guardian also followed up with an article by Glenn Greenwald, who's a former columnist for Salon.com in the U.S., and he's now across the Atlantic, so to speak, and he's working for The Guardian. Anyway, this is the one that was supposedly that dropped the bomb, so to speak, that there is a program called PRISM. I think that's an acronym for something. I'm not sure.
What is the acronym?
PRISM. It stands for, do you remember?
I don't believe so. I think it's probably has to do with the fact that most telecommunications go over fiber optics, and PRISM split light, and There was a technology where they were splitting the fiber optic cables using a PRISM to copy the telecommunications data across the lines. I think they just put it in capitals because it looks more impressive.
Yeah, that whole story about it was in the I can't seem to find it from memory. There was back in sometime in the 90s, I think it was. There were a couple of Israeli companies. I think they were Narus and Variant.
Yeah, something.
And supposedly the NSA basically went to these companies and they set up a secret room in I think it was AT&T and perhaps some other companies where they used and this was all made to sound like it was very futuristic and high tech. They used an optical splitter to route the incoming huge data pipe, if you will, into a top secret room that these companies would then use the one of the split signals to basically acquire all the traffic and funnel it all to the NSA. And this is actually kind of funny because I used to work in the telecom industry, and actually I worked on optical transport switches, which are basically the giant racks of equipment that form the backbone of the internet. And as, of course, when you design one of these things, you have this thing called it's a requirement specification, but basically it describes exactly what the system is, what it does, what standards it follows, and that sort of thing. And one of the requirements is that all these systems have backdoors, supposedly for, people like the FBI to come along and, get a warrant, and then they just sort of, it's just like a back door that like you can access and it's required by law.
It is.
It's not, you don't need to split. I mean, first of all, the splitter, like, oh, we used a PRISM. That's meant to sound like, oh, it's so fancy. Well, like, that's what you do. I mean,
that's what Sir Isaac Newton used.
Yeah, like, I mean, where I used to work, you're like, oh, yeah, do you need a splitter? Yeah, here you go. Here's one.
But PRISM sounds more esoteric.
It's like...
It does, but like, a couple hundred years ago, Isaac Newton did the same kind of thing when he was studying like optics, so I mean, it's not new technology.
Yeah, so that whole thing, I think the most interesting thing about that story was the fact that it was Israeli companies.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the first question that comes to my mind is, why would the NSA, of all people, or any U.S. intelligence organization even need
foreign nationals
to foreign companies, which are most obviously associated with foreign intelligence agencies, to do something which technologically is extremely simple, and it's almost so simple as dumb, when they didn't even really need to do that because there are backdoors already there that give you access to all the traffic.
Right.
So, yeah, that's...
This is why I'm really glad I've got these three guys on the show with me today, because I'm not a techie, but these three are techies, and they know the stuff. No, not.
One thing I wanted to add, though, is that Bill Clinton, I don't know how old the law is, but Bill Clinton signed into effect during his term a new law that it mandates all telecommunications companies, all those service providers, to install, it's kind of ambiguous, to install a method for legal law enforcement operatives like the FBI and CIA and all those people to tap their telecommunications network. They're required, and sometimes they create like a room where they can go into and basically plug into the system and record everything. And they're legally mandated to provide that access to law enforcement to ease the intercepting of data.
I got an article from the Washington Post of the 6th of June quoting Google and Yahoo, where they say that they do not have backdoors that allow the government to inspect the data. And Yahoo actually said the same. We do not provide the government with direct access to our servers, systems, or network. Maybe that's false, but
they're not a telecommunications company. They are basically a website. They have a giant rack of web servers.
I just want to back up a second before we go there.
Sorry, we're just rushing headlong into technical details.
Just so that's good, but just so that our listeners are on the same page, the follow-up story on the PRISM scandal, so to speak, was that the NSA, here's the title of the actual Guardian article, NSA taps into internet giant systems to mine user data secret files reveal. So this was the next of these secret files that were released to the public, and it was a 41-page PowerPoint presentation classified as top secret, with no distribution to foreign allies.
And designed by a trained monkey. I mean, that thing was so ugly.
Yeah, so this document was made available by The Guardian, and among the things, as Michael there has touched on, it basically said that the NSA has direct access to the systems of Google, Facebook, Apple, YouTube, Twitter, I can't remember, all the big names. We all use one or other of these internet giants. And well, that was the first thing that struck me right away. These companies came out and said, "No, we don't." Every one of them issued a statement that said they either said we have no knowledge of it.
At first they said that, and now they're like more stringent.
Or if this is really happening, they first said we're not involved in this, or if it is happening, it's happening without our awareness.
Can I say a few things on this thing?
Shoot.
Okay. So first of all, like the company would not have to provide access to the servers because all of those servers are distributed across the world, and the central office has to be able to connect to them to maintain them, probably through SSH or something like that. And also, so if Google can connect from one building in one country to another building in another country, then the NSA can too, via like just a normal like SSH connection to the server. That's total. So they could be hacking that. But the reason I think that it's unrealistic is that I watched a tech talk from one of the database admins from Facebook talking about the situation, and their servers are very consistently kind of on the edge. And the NSA coming in and running like a long-running query on one of the servers would basically like make them all fall over. So it's not really a realistic thing. I mean, the NSA going in and rooting around on one of the servers, they would see like a significant performance decrease. The server would probably fall over, and Facebook would be like, "What the hell's going on here?" I mean, it's not so simple. I mean, it's not like a river. Like with telecommunications, it's like a river where you can just dip in and get the information, right? But with a server type of situation or a database, you can't just stop the world and inspect stuff and then unstop the world. Like everyone's going to notice in a certain sense.
I've got a second explanation because I printed out the actual court order from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And here it says that it is further ordered that no person shall disclose to any other person that the FBI or NSA has sought or obtained tangible things under this order. That means they're ordered to remain silent about this whole issue, and maybe that's the explanation why they're all denying it.
That would explain why they all were in unison, no comment.
And they're giving the information to the government. The government's probably not just jumping onto the server in private and hacking it. I mean, they could, but I don't think they are.
We have a caller, I believe.
We do indeed. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Howdy.
Hi, caller. You're on the air with Larry King.
Hello.
No, they don't.
No, I think they haven't got through.
Or something. They walked away.
No, I think they may have stepped away.
But it's nice that we're getting callers. People should call in and voice their
now
and opinions.
It is actually if anyone would like to call in, again the number is U.S. number 718-508-9499. Outside the U.S. that would be 001-718-508-9499.
Excellent.
So, well, we heard in the Verizon case where there was a specific court order. Is that what you've just read from?
Yes, it's from April of this year.
Yeah, I recognize that document. So, what happened was, for this to happen, the U.S. government can ask the FISA, Foreign Intelligence
Surveillance Act.
Court. A court that was set up, not recently, it was set up in 1978, so it's been around a while, requesting that a company hand over either all data or this amount of data within certain parameters and within a certain time frame. Now, I thought it was interesting that Verizon got this order on April 25th. this court order, which is supposed to be secret, we're not supposed to have heard about it, is obtained by the Guardian and released June 6th. The next day, there's another document, the PRISM PowerPoint, or eyes only, is released. And then, I think the next day after that, things snowball, and then this guy, Edward Snowden, just pops up
out of the blue
in Hong Kong and says, I did it.
Yeah.
No. He pops up in Hong Kong, and he says, yeah, I'm in Hong Kong. I'm just down the street from a CIA field office, and I mean, he might as well have like sent his exact geographic coordinates or something, and here's my latitude and longitude, and then he says, yeah, I think maybe I'm going to consider requesting asylum in Iceland.
Why didn't he go there?
Well, yeah, why didn't he just go to Iceland? I mean, the whole thing just stunk to high heaven.
Maybe it's because he's maintaining an illusion for people. He's an actor. He's a spokesmodel. He's a kind of an Emmanuel Goldstein character to come out. And,
well, we've certainly thought about it. We don't know. We could assume he's, the real deal. He sincerely wanted to share the world this dastardly information.
He looks the part.
The dastardly deeds that are done by the powers that be. But as I've been reading around this, I realized that, he's not saying anything new.
No.
Everybody knows. Well, in a way, everybody's paying attention. Knows this goes on all the time.
Right.
Okay, the general public might be up in arms to some extent. But I look back through the Sott database for the last 8-9 years, and yeah, pretty much exactly the same thing has been said by other whistleblowers and by other commentators who, all they were doing was quoting the Department of Defense documents,
right,
saying exactly the same thing. This is what we do.
In the 1980s, there was this book called The Puzzle Palace, written by, was it Bamford or Bramford?
James Bamford, yeah.
James Bamford. In I saw the published date. It was 1983, where he was talking about that they were doing. They were actually doing this type of stuff. What they're doing now.
The NSA.
Yeah, well, the precursor to the NSA. I mean, they just sort of changed names constantly during that time. They were, listening into telegraph traffic. Just siphoning off the telegraph stuff too. And so it's just been going on for a very long time, and I think everyone kind of knows it or has known about it. It's nothing new. There's no new information here.
There's no new information. So why then is this such a big scandal?
Well, I think in the beginning, you have something to say? Oh, okay. So I think that my opinion on why there's such a scandal or why it's kind of like newish to people is there's an article by David Simon where he talks about, do you imagine the manpower it would take and all this stuff? Previously, people kind of saw it as, well, they don't have enough people to go through all the mail, so I'm safe and I'm anonymous in the masses. But people have an inherent fear of technology because they see it performing things so quickly and working so fast, and they see so much data and their gigabyte hard drives and their processors and all this stuff. And now they're afraid that the government could actually do on a large scale what everyone knows that they've been trying to do for since the East India Trading Company type of thing, reading everyone's mail, getting into everyone's life. I think now suddenly it's a little bit more viscerally close to them because they realize that they might just have the processing power to actually do it on a large enough scale to make it, actually get into a lot of people's lives.
Well, that's something I wanted to talk to you guys about. Processing power. The scale of the information that they're supposedly able to track, store, analyze, draw connections from, draw conclusions from. What are we talking about here?
Well,
is it possible?
Well, anything's possible. One of the articles on The Guardian, they were talking about these boundless informant documents about regarding the NSA's data mining tools, and this was a document that was supposedly released from the NSA or that somehow the Guardian obtained, and blah blah blah, whatever. But the document says that the NSA captured 97 billion pieces of intelligence in 30 days, ending in March 2013. only 3 billion for the USA itself, supposedly. So, of course, these numbers could be complete garbage, but let's just assume that they're not.
90 billion pieces of what kind of intelligence? You know?
Right. So the first question is 97. This was worldwide in this 30-day period. 97 billion pieces of intelligence. Now, of course, you don't know how big the data is. If you assume that, it could be an email would be very, very small, a few kilobytes. A video could be very, very large, but then maybe they're only interested in a particular part of the video, or maybe the data they're collecting is more like, this so-called metadata, which is essentially, Jane belongs to the Forest Hill Elementary School PTA group, and that consists of, because whatever, that's
in that case,
so belongs to this group, which is...
In that case, 19 billion records is not very impressive.
Right.
No.
And if they are big, if they are, say, an average of whatever, let's say they're like 100 kilobytes per day, assume they're large. Well, that's not large, but then that would work out to about 323 terabytes of data per day that they were capturing. So if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive in your computer, you have a modern computer, they were collecting 323 1 terabyte hard drives worth in a day. But then if you look at the actual internet protocol traffic, i.e. people surfing the internet, people using VoIP, like phone calls via the internet, smartphone data usage, it's still got an IP address, it's using the internet, we don't have statistics, at least that I could find for recent years, but we know that in 2011, the internet traffic average per day was about 916 petabytes per day.
What's a petabyte?
A petabyte is 1,024 terabytes. So a terabyte is 1,024 gigabytes.
There's a pattern there.
So if you have a computer with 4 gigabytes of RAM, well, 1,024 of those gigabytes is a terabyte, and 1,024 terabytes is a petabyte. You don't really have to follow all that. Just
we're talking about
bear
a
with
lot
me here.
It's
the point, the take-home point, is that the NSA was capturing. If we assume that internet traffic, as I said, these very large numbers are for 2011. So if you look at the past increase year over year of internet traffic, you extrapolate and you say, well, it increases about maybe 20-25% a year. So you'd say, well, from 2011 to 2013, you do some math, and you come up with an even bigger number, and then you divide the number of terabytes per day that the NSA was supposedly capturing for this 30-day period ending in March of this year, and you get the number that the NSA was capturing 0.02% of all IP-based traffic. Not 2%, not 0.2%, but 0.02% of all the traffic.
And that's a reasonable amount. That's a reasonable amount to be able to siphon.
And yet the impression that's coming through the airwaves, through cyberspace, is that they're after all of it. They want it all.
Let me give you an example. I did find one number. I don't know if it's true, but the entire telecommunications traffic per year in the world, and that's like including satellite stuff and everything and all telephone communications, and not just purely internet, but all telecommunication traffic, is estimated to be 1.9 zettabytes.
What's a zettabyte?
It's 1,024 exabytes, which is 1,024 petabytes.
Which is 1,024 gigabytes, which is 1,000... Never mind.
So it's really huge.
It's a lot of data.
And this Binney guy, which is the one reason why I don't trust the Binney guy, is he came out and he said that the NSA...
That's the whistleblower, William Binney.
Yeah. He's supposed to be the person who architected the whole thing. And he basically said that the NSA was building a facility that had 5 zettabytes worth of storage. 5 zettabytes. That's really huge, because all of the hard drives sold, and currently sold last year was 330 exabytes.
So it was 1 degree down.
Yeah,
right.
1 degree down from a zettabyte, so not even a whole zettabyte. So 5 zettabytes, right? Just to give you an idea of the scale. They're building this facility in Utah, 5 zettabytes, and Binney says they're going to be able to store all of the internet traffic for the next 100 years at this facility. And I said, hold on a second. No, that's not going to really happen, because even if they stored all of the telecommunications, it would be eaten up in like 2 years.
Because of the exponential growth.
Of course, next year the estimate for telecommunications data is 2.7 exabytes for the year. That's the estimate. These are estimates, because you got to understand.
Nobody knows.
You got to understand that you can't really have telecommunications traffic and then be counting everything. That takes processor power. That takes time to count every packet. They don't count them. They estimate them, because you can't count them all over the world, every connection. Nobody has this universal counter where it's like scrolling up, 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 up. Nobody really knows how much, because they're basically barely able to maintain the traffic as it is and the exponential growth. I mean, all of these servers, Twitter had all this trouble dealing with its client base, its servers falling over all the time, because there was just so many people using the system. They weren't even able to predict how much, traffic and space and servers they were going to need. I mean, the internet system is just barely holds itself together,
Yeah,
So,
and then, sorry, go ahead.
Those numbers are very impressive when you talk about petabyte and exabyte and so on. So for non-techies, it's like a foreign language, but we have to, I think, ask 3 questions. First of all, are they actually storing the data? If yes, then we have to ask, how long are they able to store the data? Because you certainly cannot store that amount of data for 10 years or longer. So is it rolling? That means they delete all the records. So maybe they're not able to store it at all. So that's, the second question is, are they analyzing it? Because just storing data doesn't help, isn't of use for anything. So do they analyze it? And if they analyze it, there's the question, what are they looking for? And how do they analyze it? Do they have like employees sitting there inspecting emails at random, or do they have computer software that runs automatic tests? And the third question is, once they have analyzed it, are they acting upon it? So they find something, what are they doing with the information? Because just analyzing it might be interesting, but if you don't have a plan with it, then it's useless, So
Right.
I think there are 3 questions we have to ask.
I think the first question is good. Is a good place to start. Are they storing it? And I did a calculation. I don't know if it's true, because I'm not really good at math, but I basically said, okay, the smallest commercially available terabyte hard drive is 2.5 inches by 1 inch by 3 inches. That's the size of it, right?
Laptop drive.
Yeah, like basically a laptop 1 terabyte hard drive that I could find. There might be a little bit bigger, but let's just go with that. And then I said, okay, well, how many of those would require storing the internet for 1 month? And I did the calculation. I don't remember the exact number. I wrote it down, unfortunately, but I didn't bring it in here. But it came up to being that if you took 146 football stadiums and stacked them 20 feet high with 2.5 inch 1 terabyte drives, that would be able to store the internet traffic for a month. I don't know if that's 100% correct, right? But
How many football
it
stadiums?
was 146.
146 football.
If you stack them next to each other with no space in between, which you can't do with a hard drive, because obviously you have to have space, you have to have cooling systems, so you couldn't even do that. And then I said, even if the NSA could store like 1% of that, they required 1% of the storage, right? So then instead of having 146 football fields, they only needed 1. That still would be, they'd have to expand their data centers by like 1 football field, type of thing, if they wanted to store all of it. But as I learned, that's not what they're claiming. They're not claiming, like even the Guardian, they're not saying that they're storing all of it. It's definitely not what they're doing.
They're storing the metadata.
Even if they could store it, how would they process it? I mean, how would you process that much data? Because sure, maybe they have some newfangled, storage systems and all that. Okay, well,
how new could they be?
How do you? I mean, you go on the internet and you do a Google search, and it Google is not storing like everything on the whole internet or something. They're when you have the search function on Sott, you have a finite amount of data, and you have a finite amount of processing power, and you have to do certain tricks to make it faster. And so of course they could be doing tricks, but when you get into such a large amount of data, I don't know what kind of computer they would be using to crunch all that and do anything with it if they're doing it the way that people normally assume. So that means either...
But Scott, haven't you heard of supercomputers?
Supercomputers?
They're super.
Yeah, apparently, I don't know what these are, but apparently these things can do super things. Well, what strikes me about this data center in Utah is that it's old news. Okay, it was wheeled out here again in tandem with these releases of data. But I went back and I've heard about this before. And yeah, there were plans. It's actually nearly complete, apparently, to build this giant data center in the desert.
In the desert. Brilliant idea.
Because as Jay just mentioned,
love heat.
For all that processing power, you need cooling system.
Yeah. Which they have a 3 million gallon water cooling system and reservoir in the desert. They paid money to pipe water to the desert. They couldn't have put this next to a cool, river or something to use the natural environment.
That's genius.
I mean, these guys they're just wasting money. I mean, this is just bullshit waste of money is all it is.
Now, the FISA court order that Michael read out, and in statements given by the Obama administration since this scandal broke, they've tried to put a damper on this by saying, well, we're not obviously after the content of emails, phone calls, et cetera, et cetera. We're looking at the metadata. So don't worry, people. So what is metadata?
All right. From a computer perspective, do you guys want to do this? From a computer perspective, metadata is what describes the structure of data. Right? So the internet works by sending little tiny envelopes of information. Right? Mm-hmm. The metadata about that envelope is that it has a header at offset X, body at offset Y, to field. That's the metadata describes how data is laid out, the structure of it. What they are reading is the to and from fields. That is considered the content of the message. That is not metadata. That's content. That's, it's necessary for the internet to work. All internet service providers read the content of your message more or less in order to transmit it by virtue of the technology. That's why sometimes I think a lot of these privacy people don't really understand what the internet is. But when they say that they're using metadata, they're using a term that they don't understand. They're trying to dismiss people's concerns. Oh, it's just metadata. And no such thing. All right? That's not what they're reading. They're reading the data. I mean, we have to be honest about what they're reading. They are reading the contents of the message, at least part of it. Not the whole thing. They might not be reading the body of the message, but they are reading the to and from fields, and that is considered content in a certain sense. That is the body of the message.
When you browse the website, metadata can also be the link itself, the URL. There is an argumentation which actually asks, is that part of the content, or is it actually metadata, the link? Yeah, I think it belongs to the message body and not actually to something like metadata. But in this court order from Verizon, which is actually a telephone company, it actually lists the things that they have to store and hand over to the NSA. You should read it. Telephony metadata includes comprehensive communications routing information, including but not limited to session identifying information. That means originating and terminating telephone number, an international mobile subscriber identity number, an international mobile station equipment identity number, trunk identifier, telephone calling card numbers, time and duration of call. So they're storing more or less the IDs of the telephones. They're storing the call numbers, originating and terminating number. So that is what they consider as metadata.
Okay.
But that is data. By the definition of the word metadata is like above data, whereas that is data.
I saw an interview given by Susan Landau. I can't remember who or what she was from, but she pointed out that metadata is just as useful, if not more useful, to prying eyes, let's say, than the actual content would ever be. And what she was saying made sense to me, because I thought, well, does the government really want to know what you do, or your opinion of what you were doing? They would much rather see who you're connected with, who you're talking to, and get an overview of the links between people. Maybe one of you want to expand on that, because it made a lot of sense to me that the metadata is actually the gold and the rest is just dirt.
Yeah. I think it could be, it's just my theory, that they're aiming in constructing like a social network graph, similar to what you can see on Facebook, all your friends and who you're connected to, like a star diagram, who is connected to whom. And they're using not just Facebook or Skype or telephone numbers or internet sites, they use actually everything to construct this very complex graph so that they can see who is connected to who and who is interested in which ideas. And for that, it's not necessary to have actually the message body. You only have to know who is connected to who. So when I have a Skype profile and I have entered my telephone number there, and then they get to the telephone company and get all the metadata, then they can link these telephone numbers to the information in Skype, and they can, so to speak, expand and construct this social network graph. So for them, it's not even necessary if they get the message bodies. It doesn't matter if it's anonymous or not. Even the anonymous data help to complete the graph that they could try to compile.
Think about this. Google requires you to give your telephone number to verify your account.
Exactly.
That ties your telephone number to every search you make when you are logged into Google, which is tied to your IP address, which is updated because it's trivially easy to update the IP address. So they keep a track of a history of every time you've connected from what IP addresses, and they know all this stuff. So when you collect that metadata here and you collect some data over here, at first each side looks completely innocuous until you mix it together, and suddenly, just imagine if McCarthy had access to the system. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party or a homosexual? Imagine if McCarthy had said, okay, well, give me a query on every person who's ever searched gay porn. And then suddenly, and remember, those people were really tortured. They were outed. They had their careers ruined. They had their lives utterly and completely ruined for even being tenuously connected to communism or homosexuality. And so, what will happen when one of these senators who, oh, God sends me down here, decides that, homosexuality is a sin, and they're going to use the NSA's powers or whatever intelligence community powers to say, request from Google, every IP address, the metadata, every IP address and telephone number, which is just metadata. Oh, it's okay. Every IP that's searched for gay porn. Boom. Give me from Verizon, all of this, and then they start connecting it together, and then suddenly they have a complete profile of you and everything you've ever searched for and everything you've looked for and every book you've bought and all this different stuff. It's very quickly becomes
I reckon
like
a senator today, let's say a McCarthyite type, does get his hands on this kind of data. But what holds him back is the fact that all the dirty data on him is also available.
That's true.
They're kind of caught in the web of their own doing, kind of. I want to talk about the...
Can I add something that Jason just said?
Sure.
Because I have one piece of data that actually is very interesting. Again, from this court order against Verizon, it expires actually on the 19th of July, 2013, which is just 3 months. So you could ask, why just have an order that just lasts for 3 months when you want to be able to store data like permanently? And that, I think, confirms this little theory that we have here, that they only need to download the data once to actually enhance their social graph and relationship graph. And once that is done, they're done, and you don't need any more data, except maybe in the future. But that's, I think, an interesting detail. Just 3 months.
Yeah. So they kind of what they want is a snapshot of an overview of relationships between people.
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense because, we discussed this earlier. The sheer number of resources required at the second question that Michael raised, the analyzing of the data.
Right.
You pointed out that the man hours required to intelligently, siphon through data on any one person is so vast that it's useless to them. In the meantime, the world has moved on, and they're behind.
Here's another piece of information that people they have this fantasy about technology where technology like computers are really good at solving very specific types of problems, ones that require performing the same action over and over again, adding 500 million numbers together, things like that. They're very fast with that. One thing that they are absolutely horrible about, despite all of the fantasies of computer scientists since the 1970s, is something like natural language processing. Google Translate is so good because it provided the option for users to correct translations, and it recorded the corrected translations. And the translation websites that are supposedly like have this huge R&D department and millions and billions of dollars to throw at this problem, they have decided to basically implement a mechanical Turk, getting users to correct the translations in each time to change the system because computers cannot process language very well. All right? Mm-hmm. So if you have billions of records that you've taken from people, getting a computer program to intelligently give semantic meaning to them, give some sort of meaning to them. Is Bob talking about is Bob talking about bombs, or is he saying like that, barbecue we had the other day was the bomb? Does the computer have a real easy way to understand that? What if he uses like internet language where everything's like encoded with this, it's spelled the way it sounds type of thing? Computers are not good at that. It doesn't matter how much processing power you throw at it, just the very nature of the technology is just never going to be good at that.
It's always going to be limited to the algorithms that are programmed into it.
Right. What the computer could do is it could index every single message that referred to the word bomb or every single message that referred to the word pork, and they could search it, but then it would return maybe like 5 billion, results. And then what are you going to do? How do you trim that down? And what kind of algorithms? And Google works very intently on this problem naturally, because they're a search engine. But they haven't really got it right in a certain sense. So I'm sure the NSA hasn't either.
Obama's kind of he certainly appears to be on the back foot about this. And something he said in defense of the NSA is that, well, come on, people. There were always going to be trade-offs. You can't have 100% security and 100% privacy and zero inconvenience. And what's implied in this is that there can be privacy on the internet in particular. But we were talking the other day, Jason, and you said quite emphatically that the internet is such that anonymity is impossible. Truly, if someone wanted to find you, they could.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even before that, by its very nature, it's open.
Yeah.
Can you expand a bit on that? About how messages how these packets of information are sent from one A to B?
So a thing that, if any of you guys have something input to put on here, just jump in. You have to understand a couple of things about computers. First of all, computers are not free, all right? Everything takes two major things in computers, time and energy, right? You have to plug electricity into it, and for anything that the computer does, it takes time. Now, this time is measured in nanoseconds, really, really small, less than microseconds, less than milliseconds, very small amounts of time. But it has to do, for everything that it does, it has to do those things billions of times. So that starts to add up until you get to milliseconds and seconds. So it takes time to do everything for a computer. It might do it very fast on your computer, but it takes time, and it also takes energy. So to send information back and forth, the computer has to split up things into very small increments and send them to another computer, and it sends more than it should, right? Because packets can get lost, things can happen. And then the other computer has to reassemble all those things, look at the information, say, where does this go, what does it do, and then send it back out along a gigantic chain. In order, for every step that you have in that process, it takes time, right? So if you have to send one packet, but before you do it, you have to encrypt it, that makes it slower because it has to do that millions and millions and millions and millions and billions of times. So that when you're sending information over the internet, it's easier and it's more robust for you not to bother to encrypt it. So all information traffic on the internet, unless expressly in a couple of situations, is plain text. It's open.
Plain text.
That means that it
can
readable.
be read.
Yeah, it can be read by anybody who can install a free software program, called EtherApe for Linux. And I wrote a packet sniffer for my own network in C# once to see what was going on. And all that stuff between computers is open. All of your FTP passwords, all your email passwords, that all goes out over the internet unless you're using SSL, which you can now do in some instances. But even then, that's a very thin layer of security, which the NSA most certainly can crack. I mean, it's not an uncrackable protocol. It's just more difficult to crack than most encryption methods for that. So when you think about the internet, it is all open. It's all readable. Any system administrator sitting at your ISP has a computer at any point. He can open up a program, and he can look at anybody's account and view their traffic and reassemble those packets and do whatever he wants through the entire internet. And we're not even talking about the NSA. We can do it in our own house, right? Because it's the nature of the internet. It's all open. It's too much work to doubly, triply encrypt each and every packet and send it there and exchange the keys and all this different stuff. That's so much work.
At some point, encrypted data needs to be de-encrypted to be read by
which is its
something else
flaw.
that needs to pass it on. Then
that's its ultimate flaw.
But this is kind of the crux of the matter, because all the stuff we're talking about, and especially the fact that the internet is basically it's basically wide open. This is kind of to me the crux of the matter is that the internet has always been this way. Right now people are talking about all these things and they're saying it's metadata or it's this or it's that, or you don't really have security and safety, and even if you're using SSL to connect to your email server, when your email server passes the message along
it
to be
doesn't
delivered,
use SSL.
It's not using SSL. It's not encrypted. It's plain text, unless you're using something like PGP or some other encryption thing, like
which
Jason
is a pain in
saying.
the ass.
But this has always been the case, and there have always been intelligence agencies, including the NSA, who have been, certainly in recent years, perhaps they have developed new and interesting ways of extracting information from data, metadata, whatever. To me that doesn't really matter. The fact is that for decades and decades and decades, there have been, probably hundreds of years, there have been these institutions who have been basically spying on us. So why is everyone
But here's the kicker.
going crazy now about this?
Here's the kicker.
We all knew it, right?
People are stupid. No, not to be offensive, but you're ignorant of the internet was designed to be open way of sharing documents, of basically being an open way of sharing text. It never really occurred to the people who designed it to be like, what if we want to keep all this private? Because the spirit at that time, especially among computer scientists, and even today, was about this concept of like open source, open everything, open protocols, making it easier for people to develop the technology and share information. That's all about. So in cryptography, it was certainly it's antithetical to that whole spirit in a certain sense of we need to keep everything private and encrypted and blah, 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 blah. They didn't think about it that way. So the internet and all the internet protocols were designed about that. And with the explosion of the internet, cryptography became impractical for the functioning of it because so many people liked it, so many people used it, that all the infrastructure has a difficult time keeping up with the constant increase. New people coming online, new people want to connect to Facebook, new people want to do emails, new people want to do chat messenger, stuff like that. And those services do use something called SSL to kind of sort of implement some sort of encryption and privacy, and it does kind of work for the average person, but it's not going to work for any government agency or any hacker who has a lot of time on his hands.
The way I always explain things like using SSL, or if you're in a hotel room and you're using shared Wi-Fi, and there is a smart person that is in another hotel room on the same network as you, and you're logging into your bank. Well, a bank is a bad example because usually
Facebook, they did this
usually
with
they
Facebook.
use SSL. You're logging into Facebook and it's not encrypted. They have your login, they have your password, they have your Facebook account.
And this happened.
Okay, now that's like kind of like people talk about script kiddies. It's you use things like SSL and basic encryption and to protect against those individuals who are basically script kiddies, which is people who are sort of more annoying than threatening,
Yeah.
Okay, they may steal your bank account information. Well, you can close your account, cancel, you get refunded for fraudulent charges. It's an inconvenience, but nothing bad happens.
Yeah, they're not like they're terrorists.
That you can't actually really protect yourself very well against some intelligence agency that has probably some technology that's rather astounding to by modern standards, and that is determined to make you look like a bad guy. Or
well, here's the crux on that one is that in order to have SSL, all those companies register their certificates with like VeriSign or what's my favorite one, DigiCert, which is used by the Department of Homeland Security. But you have to register that certificate, and all these telecommunication companies are mandated to provide law enforcement with data. Don't you think that they're required to give them the certificate? So, I mean, they don't have to crack SSL at all. That's ridiculous. They just go to the company that the certificate is registered to and say, "Give me the keys."
And even then,
they do it.
They may not be interested in exactly what you're saying. They may be interested in just a connection between you and someone else, which they may be able to extract in some other way.
But they already can, because the headers of that message are plain text, because it has to be routed.
Yeah, but again, none of that is anything new, and it's always been that way. And so I sort of keep coming back to the question of, why has this Edward Snowden come out? Why this revelation about Verizon, and why this Edward Snowden character, and why is everyone up in arms right now when, I mean, especially ever since 9/11, back then it was okay that everyone was being spied on, and now it's not. I mean, of course, everyone knew that they were being spied on back then. Now all of a sudden it's not acceptable. And, what about the timing of the event? Like, is there anything else going on at the time that we're not supposed to be looking at because we're obsessed about metadata and all this other nonsense?
Well, on that note, I mean, okay, this guy, Edward Snowden, goes public. And now he's supposed to be hiding somewhere. Like you can hide in China or anywhere for that matter.
Sure you can.
And not be seen or found or leave some kind of trace. So what is going on here? Well, I think it's interesting that it's not really being said, but it's always implied in the background that, in fact, Obama did say explicitly in the press conference he gave shortly after the story broke that this program, he was referring to the PRISM program, is what helps us to find terrorists. But that falls flat on its face because, well, as our listeners will be aware, the real terrorists invariably are state agencies who carry out false flag attacks and manipulate people into this global war, into believing this global war on terror, that all these security measures are necessary to protect you from the bad guys out there. We've got a caller now. Do we, Scotty?
We sure do.
Okay, let's take a call.
Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Joe.
Oh, Joe!
Yeah,
what
Joe.
a surprise!
Oh, Joe, somebody we don't know at all.
Yeah.
Welcome, you're on the air.
Welcome to Sott Talk Radio.
This is my first time calling
in. What's your question or comment?
Well, I was just listening to the show. It's a great show actually, and I think people, need to know that basically they're not, nothing they say or say or do or write or whatever on the internet is private. So if there's something that you kind of morally wouldn't stand by or wouldn't like people to know about, you shouldn't be doing it on the internet. Basically, you do it privately. That seems like a no-brainer. But on the other question of why now, you were just kind of touching on it there on why this has come out right now and what else is going on. Well, first of all, I think these kind of things are released periodically. These kind of like exposures of just how kind of fascist the U.S. government, for example, has become, and the whole intelligence apparatus has become, and it's just put out there that really to test people's reaction in a way, or to just kind of say to them, basically, listen, this is what we're doing, and what are you going to do about it? Oh, nothing. That's what I thought, type of thing, And to kind of, it's a whole kind of like getting them to accept something, and to tell them that, to basically say, listen, here's another step towards an overt police state or a fascist state, and when they accept it and don't do anything about it, no one complains or accept it under some bullshit rationale like it's protecting against terrorism, etc., then the next thing will be easier for them to accept. The more of these fascistic type steps that people accept, the easier it'll be to continue on down that line, you know. Because I can't think of any other reason why it's news at all, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you guys have been saying, I mean, this has been in the news for a long time, you know, about...
Yeah,
you know,
it is surfaced time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the Patriot Act was about.
Exactly.
You know, 10 years ago, and it was. I mean, anybody who has even a passing interest in the kind of stuff and the kind of legislation and laws that have been passed since 9/11, knew this or knows this. If they researched it a bit, they knew that this kind of stuff was going on. So big deal. Why make a big oh my God, this is happening now? The only thing I can think of is that it's just to kind of to test the public reaction, or to just not even test the public reaction. They know the public aren't going to react. They just want to kind of rub their faces in it and have everybody kind of just cow their or bow their heads and, you know, say yes sir, no sir, whatever sir, you know. It's kind of domination. It's almost like a domination thing, you know.
Well, I think if I can add a comment to that. And it seems that what people are doing is they're working very hard to kind of deify the state, because one of the main fears of Christians, and one of the main things of Christianity, was that, you know, God was all seeing and all knowing. You know, he knew what you were saying in private and what you were thinking. And that's what people are basically saying about the government here. They're saying they know everything, they see everything. And with the Obama and his kill list and drone striking, and he can point his finger at anybody and kill them. As I was saying before to you in a conversation we had, basically, you know, the United States government, or even the president or the office, has become kind of this, you know, thunderbolt of Zeus, and striking down the unrighteous with his mighty predator drone Thunderbolt. And that they're basically deifying the government and saying, look, we know everything, we see everything, and we can kill anyone anywhere, we can render anyone anywhere, we can do all of this stuff.
Yeah,
you know, so
and
what do you think about that?
Yeah, for the people, there's an awful lot of people out there who hear that kind of stuff going on, and they like it. They think it's cool. They think, oh, thank God, you know, there's somebody in control, in power. And, you know, I mean, that whole authoritarian follower type thing. If you're an authoritarian follower, you essentially like authority. You like someone to make decisions for you. So there's really no limit to the scope of an authority to say, okay, listen, I'm going to take control of this part of your life. I'm going to take control of this part of your life. I'm going to impose this kind of a stricture or a control over you. And the people who like authority and like authority to make decisions for them will be happy enough with that. There's a bunch of
I think it's even worse than that.
Yeah, what?
I think it's even worse than that. I think that even the people who are not authoritarians kind of like that. I was giving Neil at one point this kind of like analogy where, you know, imagine that you're sleeping in your bed and some masked men come in, they put a hood over you and they put you in the back of a truck, and it's driving down the road and it turns off into some bumpy road, and you feel it's getting bumpier and bumpier, and then the car starts to swerve and it gets worse and worse. And as you're sitting there with your handcuffs and your bag over your head in the back of this truck, you're not thinking about escape anymore. You're just hoping to God that somebody's behind the wheel, even if they're evil. At least tell me that somebody is driving this crazy thing, you know, because and a lot of people, like these actors people and all this other stuff, they want so bad for there to be a grand conspiracy, because at least then there's somebody in control, and, you know, somebody has this grand master plan, some all-powerful, even if evil. I mean, there must be a God in heaven, even if God is evil in a certain sense.
Yeah, it's basically there has to be some authority of whatever flavor they need it, you know. And maybe I don't know if there's an argument to say that they've been programmed that way, or they've been slowly programmed to you know, to want that kind of authority, you know. I mean, on this NSA kind of wiretapping thing, I mean, there's been an awful lot of Hollywood movies over the past 10, 15, going back maybe 15, 20 years on this kind of, you know, depicting this kind of NSA surveillance, you know. You know, if you think of movies like Enemy of the State or Minority Report and stuff, you know, that were blockbuster movies and stuff. I mean, I think the movies, and this is not just in this area, they do it in many other areas as well, but movies have played a part in conditioning people to either accept this kind of thing, and specifically wiretapping, as normal, or to, put it kind of make it so fictional, or so when people see stuff in the movies, it's like there's a break with reality that I don't really believe that kind of thing is happening. It's kind of a weird thing. It's almost like they play with people's minds as to whether or not this is real, but then people read it now, they hear it, that it's real, basically, what do you call it, enemy of the state, the stuff that was enemy of the state, where they have these cameras that they can follow you and stuff, that light, but that's all pretty much real, and they have access to all of your emails, all of your phone calls, etc.
They announced not long after the story broke that some poll in the U.S. found the majority of people were supportive of mass surveillance and thought that Snowden was a traitor. Whether or not that's a true reflection of opinion, you can see that is the impression they would like to broadcast. Social proof that we all are behind this.
It's almost like a fake kind of argument or a phony kind of discussion that they're creating about it, because personally, and this is just my opinion, but I don't really see why anybody else would have a problem with it either. I don't really have a problem with, in this day and age, in the state of the world, I don't care if the government, any government, is checking my emails and listening to my phone calls. They're very welcome to it, I try to say as much as I can about what I think as publicly as I can anyway, on Facebook and on, I don't, So in terms of like, people believe or anything that would be a threat to the state, I don't care. I'm saying it on Facebook. And secondly, the other thing then is my personal life, right? My private correspondence with family members or friends and stuff. And there's not an awful lot in there that would be really of much interest to. Well, I hope it wouldn't be of much interest to people in the NSA, because they'd be pretty sad individuals if they're kind of getting off and reading my private emails, bitching at my mom or something, or my dad,
It's true when you spread truth, for example. That's one of the things that actually benefit from being shared or even listened in.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't. The average person in America, really, who's hiding what? Anybody who's doing something that they don't want the government or the NSA to know about, they shouldn't be doing it on the internet. Are they worried? Is someone like doing some kind of I don't know. Think of anything that you wouldn't want the government to know, but in the sense of that they could prosecute you for it. What else is there? That you should be afraid of.
Well, okay.
It's on a principle thing. After that, it's like, I don't want the NSA to know that I'm having I'm falling out with my mom, and that we're having we've exchanged harsh words over email.
But they're not interested in that.
I don't like the idea of that, huh?
Yeah. They're not interested in that.
I think
they're not
probably more interested.
What are they interested in?
I think they're probably more interested in, like you were saying, that you don't really mind if if they're reading your emails because you're saying the same thing in email that you're saying on Facebook. And I think for most people, that's not the case. I think for a lot of people, they feel a certain way and they see that their government is doing something and they really don't agree with it. And they'll say it in the privacy of their own home, but they're scared to death to say it in public. And I think it would be a very interesting exercise if everyone who actually felt this way did actually start speaking up and post it on your Facebook page and post it on Twitter, and give them a whole lot of data to work with.
Right?
Exactly. What are they going to do when they discover that the majority of the population is, kind of like a little in
denial of intelligence.
Like a
service attack.
And of course, if everybody's saying it, because most people I talk to, it's like they have. In fact, it was one of my friends the other day was saying that he was speaking to some French people, and they got chatting, and the guy, he owns a business, and he said, the government, they instituted these laws, and I had like 30 people employed. I ran a company. I had 30 people working for me. Providing me a job, providing them jobs, and the government came in and said, "Oh, here's a bunch of regulations," And he had to either spend €500,000 or close his business. So he closed his business and laid off all his workers, and now he's an independent craftsman. And it's like, you know, people don't, even things like that, they won't actually go out and publicly say anything. They just keep it to themselves and just kind of mention it if they sort of meet with a, you know, sort of a more collinear soul, someone with similar viewpoints or something, then they'll share it. But otherwise, they're just scared to death to say anything about it.
Yeah, but they shouldn't be, really.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is that most people have some kind of skeleton in their closet. Now, it's not much
like
of a
what?
skeleton. No, like what? Like they've been to websites they know they shouldn't have been, for example.
Right.
And they were beating off at 2 a.m. while Mrs. was upstairs.
Kangaroos slathered in peanut butter. You know?
Right.
You know, I'm sure we all have our little moments where we go, I wonder if they'll ever
So what it
expose
comes
that
down
on
to is
me.
blackmail then.
Yeah, basically.
Exactly.
That's what they're kind of doing to a large part of the population. Because, I mean, there might be people who are homosexual and have been on homosexual porn websites, and they just don't want people to know about it. Okay.
Right.
That's fine. That's all right, you know? So that is, in a certain sense, part of what the NSA is, what's happening in the press right now, is it is kind of emotional blackmail against certain types of people.
Yeah, but Joe asked, what are they interested in? And I think it's like a social graph, as I mentioned earlier, to see who is connected with whom. And because they also want to see and study the world, but they do it with technology, you know?
But here's the thing. I mean,
And what if everybody spoke their mind and everyone was connected to everyone else? What the hell would they do then?
Exactly.
Nothing. They would go, well, that was useless.
So what you guys seem to be saying is this is basically a bluff.
Yeah, kind of. You know,
Apart-
I mean,
it kind
they
of
might
sounds-
do it. But
Go on.
It kind of sounds like it to me, you know. It's, I mean, apart from those few small things that you can think of that someone would feel that they might be blackmailed by, you know. I mean, maybe there's a lot of people who would have, you know, who might have been on such websites or whatever, and might fear that the NSA will, you know, send them an email and say, if you don't stop posting anti-government messages on Facebook, we are going to send details of your interneting to your significant other or something.
which is an unrealistic fear, you know. I mean, because if they ever played that card, you know, that would be a Pyrrhic victory, because they'd play that card and the other person wouldn't be destroyed, and then you'd be like, okay, well, now where are you?
Exactly. So I'm really struggling to see.
It's an irrational fear.
Yeah, but I'm struggling. Well, I'm struggling to see why, from their point of view, from the NSA point of view, what they what they can achieve from this, apart from that kind of like idea of, you know, like it's a psychological ploy to some people who might have something to hide. But other than that, then the main thing might be what Maggie was saying there, that it's a more in-depth look at the kind of way people are organizing, the way people are thinking. But shit, I mean, I don't need all those, what are they, exabytes and stuff of data and computers for real. I don't need that to kind of get a good idea of what people are thinking in the world today, you know what I mean? And I don't think governments really have
Just read the Sott page. You know?
Well, that's something that
I don't think governments be afraid of.
That's something we were going to get into. You know, what is an intelligence agency? So they gather intelligence. Well, why do they gather? What is intelligence? Well, they want to know, they want knowledge, I guess. They want as much information about how the world works, how it is. I guess they believe that they're after an objective view of the world with which to then...
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. But I'm looking at our little operation, SottNet. I mean, that's basically what we do.
Yeah.
And we analyze it. We don't need terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, whatever they are, it gets to the point, if you have an objective foundational basis of knowledge, you can open the mainstream paper the next day, scan it, and just get the gist, and you already have a more objective overview of what is going on out there than all the analysts and all the supercomputers NASA has put together.
Pretty much. NSA.
NASA's NSA, NASA. They're all the same to me.
Alphabet soup.
So,
well, go on.
I can see how this kind of thing will be justified by by the whole war on terror and preventing terrorist attacks and keeping, eavesdropping on terrorists, because, I can see how at a certain level that the infrastructure for that would be put in place by all the people who man that infrastructure and all the money that's thrown at it from Congress and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That would be the rationale given to the authoritarian.
People would buy into it, and you could,
yeah,
and people would buy into it, and people who work in it, and they would basically put that in place and have that whole infrastructure, and it's ridiculous when you realize the truth about the war on terror. But from their point of view, they might get a bit paranoid, and they start to think, well, how many terrorists are there out there? Really, you start looking at, it's not just foreigners, it's not just Muslims anymore. It could be anybody, and you extend it. If you let your mind, your imagination wander a little bit in the position of these people, you can see how they would eventually extend it to, well, anybody. We need to really be sure. We need to cover everybody. So let's get data from everybody. But then I'm pretty sure also that there are people above and beyond that who realize that that's all bullshit. They understand the truth of the war on terror, that there is no real terror threat. But, so maybe it's just putting the structure in place, and, maybe this whole NSA and CIA and all of the people that populated, and it's an end in itself. It's not a means to an end, if you know what I mean. It's just having that structure in place and having stories like this that come out. They all just support the idea of a war on terror. So it's just part of the propaganda, really, And all that data really is useless, ultimately useless to anybody. And there is no grand conspiracy behind it, There is no ultimate goal why the real secret government needs all this data. They don't need it. It's pointless, like we were just saying. There really isn't any threat from people. And certainly I don't think there's any threat that they would be able to analyze by gathering everybody's emails and phone calls, because, I think if there's a threat to the government, is a revolution, and I think revolutions tend to kind of happen spontaneously rather than be a long planned, plot. But just one other thing I want to say about this Snowden guy, that's just bullshit to me. I mean, he's mirroring what's his face, Assange, much, and the whole WikiLeaks thing. And the whole thing is, it's very similar to the whole WikiLeaks thing in a way, because, and of course, Assange came out and said that he was a hero. Unsurprisingly, that Snowden was a hero, but it's basically the same thing, because the same thing was true about WikiLeaks. All the stuff that WikiLeaks produced had been in the press for several years beforehand. All of the details about, and in fact, much worse details about the the crimes and the war crimes, etc., of the U.S. military, etc., etc. That was all in the press. Much worse evidence for those things were in the press, were in the normal media press, many years beforehand. But suddenly WikiLeaks come out and there's this aura of, oh, this is hidden super secret information. But you look at the information and it's not an expose. So this guy Snowden's with him. I mean, he's saying basically the NSA is recording all your phone calls and your emails. Whoopie-doo.
We already knew that.
That's what the Patriot Act said that we could do, 10 years ago.
Exactly. Well, I'm getting deja vu in so many ways from this story.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the NSA wiretapping scandal. So that came out in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Now that originally that was because of the whistleblower that Jason mentioned earlier, William Binney, former NSA. Binney was with the NSA for 40 years. Unlike Snowden, who was with them for not 3 or 4 months as a subcontractor. Anyway, the New York Times sat on this for a year. Anyway, it eventually was released 2006, and you had the illegal wiretapping scandal. The program then was called Stellar Wind, codename for information collection activities performed by the NSA. Actually, no, it wasn't Binney who revealed it. It was another whistleblower, Thomas Tam.
Wow,
New York
this
Times.
is the most secret agency in the entire world.
Oh, man, I've got a list of 7 whistleblowers from the NSA in the last 10 years.
They're hemorrhaging information.
So
on purpose.
the operation was approved by Bush on the 4th of October 2001. Now, what I found interesting was that this PRISM operation, it wasn't, the first we're hearing of it is this court order for Verizon to hand over data. That was issued on April 25th. Now, April 25th is 10 days after the Boston bombings. Then the Stellar Wind was initiated, at least on paper, less than a month after 9/11. So you've got the scandal, so to speak, following on the heels of the only two actual in inverted commas terrorist attacks in the United States. There does seem to be a pattern here.
Yeah. So you were asking kind of what is going on now that they would release this to kind of either distract the population or, make, in a sense of people actually feeling positive about it, that there's this all-seeing eye, if I can use that term, that they feel comforted by that, and that kind of offsets maybe any exposure or any negative press for the government from other stories that are going on at the same time. I mean, the one that springs to mind is it's an ongoing story, but it's Obama kind of officially saying that he's going to arm the Syrian rebels who are essentially Al-Qaeda and who are a bunch of, cutthroats. Basically, cut hearts. So they cut out the internal organs of their enemies and eat them. That's the kind of people that that Obama is saying, yes, we're going to support these people. I don't know if that's
because the government's never done that before.
Contra.
I know.
Iran-Contra, exactly.
And
I don't know
I
don't know if it's something that that's something they would want to distract from, because I really at this point don't think that people don't care about anything that's going on in the world. I can't imagine what would have to happen, for anybody to get worked up about anything that's going on in the world. I can't imagine. But anything the government does, the government could, I don't know, Obama could.
The very first thing
maybe
I
something
noticed,
religious, he could, like, if he kind of like spat on the cross or, I don't know, burn the American flag, maybe. Something along those lines. People might get a bit annoyed. But,
or if he got oral sex in the Oval Office, they might impeach him.
Yeah, they might.
I mean, not if he's killing people and not if he's got rights to kill people without a trial. Nobody cares about that. But if he got a blowjob, get him out of there.
Yeah. Or if he desecrated the American flag, if he wiped his bum with the American flag, people might have a revolution.
Although Larry
but
Flint.
I think he'd be careful not to do that.
Speaking of revolution, I got an alert in my inbox when this story broke, and I started reading it, and I just moved on because to me it was like, oh, whatever, old news. But I started paying attention then when I was on Facebook, and I was seeing all these comments, people getting worked up about it. I was like, okay, what's going on here? Talking about revolution tomorrow, and get them. It was definitely a marked kind of. I guess it was anger, but is it really anger? Are they really that shocked? Like you mentioned, Joe. I mean, they've been fed this programming through movies, through other relations for the past 10 plus years. Is it kind of false shock?
Here's an idea that it's a kind of a bit of reverse psychology in a way, or it's it's actually a means to an end, in the sense that they put out this kind of thing, saying that they've been recording everybody's emails and telephone calls, and they really haven't, but they just say that they have, so they can see who gets worked up about it, and then they can start recording their telephone calls and emails.
Exactly.
Kind of like bait. It's bait, basically,
The ultimate honey trap. Speaking of honey traps, Edward Snowden and his girlfriend, that's just too weird. I mean, here you've got this guy who's supposedly left behind his fiancée in Hawaii, who's a pole dancer.
Now, is he a stripper or a pole dancer?
I believe the term is pole dancer because she's a former ballerina. So
I want to ask the question. Oh, so she just dances on a pole with her clothes on?
Well, just a couple of clothes, but not much.
Not much, but she's still clothed. Okay. Just want to know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then it's kind of sort of adds this whole sexy element to this thing,
but she's military. She's a military brat, though, isn't she? I mean, it's so convenient. She's like the daughter of some.
I'm not sure about that. But they supposedly the impression that we're meant to get from this is that he left her to stand for a higher truth. He was doing the honorable thing.
His money. I left money and I left a comfortable home and all that stuff.
Yet they were renting a house in Hawaii, which they left on May 6th, exactly 1 month before this release. And I'm just thinking, hang on a minute. This sounds like a story.
Handler.
Yeah, it's a story to accompany it that sort of fleshes it out.
It's like a really cheesy Hollywood movie.
It's cheesy.
It is, yeah.
I'm telling
you, they should make another Bourne movie. With Edward Snowden, Jason Bourne, Matt Damon as Jason Bourne as Edward Snowden.
Matt Damon as Edward Snowden.
This actually, I was looking into how this came about. This actually goes back to January. In January, have you seen the video, the interview he gives to The Guardian that was posted on or about the 6th?
Yes.
Anyway, that was professionally made by an Academy Award-winning or nominated documentary filmmaker called Laura Poitras, I think.
Yeah.
And she then gave an interview to Salon.com.
Which is where Greenwald used to work.
Which is where Glenn Greenwald used to work.
Mm-hmm.
In January, she says that she was contacted by, and she didn't know it was Edward Snowden at the time, but I've got to read out some of this interview she gave about how the story came about, because it's like, fool me once, shame on you. So she's asked, how did all this begin? I was originally contacted in January, anonymously. The Salon asks, by Edward Snowden? Well, I didn't know who it was. What was the format? Via email. It said, I want to get your encryption key and let's get on a secure channel. And then she's asked, and this person didn't say what it was about, and she said, no, he just said, I have some information in the intelligence community, and it won't be a waste of your time. And
Obsidian level encryption.
And then she's asked, did you immediately know what to do, how to go about it so it would be a secure protocol? I actually did. I have a lot of experience because I've been working with, as you note in your introduction, I've done filming with WikiLeaks. I know Jacob Applebaum.
Ooh, cool.
I already had encryption keys, but what he was asking for was beyond what I was using in terms of security and anonymity for WikiLeaks. So this was the next step up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Salon asks, how did it proceed from there? Well, I can't go into too many details, but sort of ongoing correspondence, blah, blah, blah. At that point, it was all completely theoretical, but I had a feeling it was legit. And then she's asked, how come you think he contacted you? Were you the first person he contacted? Well, I can't speak for him. Presumably, she's talking about Edward Snowden. Glenn and I, Glenn Greenwald, the journalist, had just touched base about this because he was contacted later in the spring. I think he got the email in February. Blah, 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 blah. The point I'm trying to make here is that there's open email correspondence going back 6 months, and we're supposed to believe this cropped up on and caught the NSA with their pants down.
Yeah.
Right,
in June.
As we noted earlier about encryption, encryption is not
fail-safe.
Yeah, that's their explanation. Oh, they were talking about it for 6 months, but no, it was encrypted, so that's why the NSA didn't know. But they're the NSA.
Aside from that, you don't have to send encryption keys manually. It's usually negotiated automatically, so they don't seem to have a lot of knowledge about encryption.
Yeah, so if people think about it, then this has been going on. NSA have been tapping phones and email. Well, they've been doing it for years, and you would assume that one of the things, apart from terrorism, let's say, bomb, White House, kill, president, those kind of words, Allah Akbar, Muhammad Jihad, Jerka, those kind of words. Apart from those kind of words, they would also be probably high on their list for keywords to pull, to flag, that the system would flag would be stuff about, certainly they would have all of their employees, including contractors, they'd probably have all of their emails. They're watching all of their emails, right? You can't do that if you have any sense at all. And also any kind of words about, coming from those people, contacting people like the woman that you just mentioned, even Glenn Greenwald's name, I have information. Surely it's going to pick up on that kind of stuff, right? If the system's worth its salt, it's going to do that, right? And it's thrown all this money at it. Surely they've developed a decent system. But apparently, they missed this guy, right? So everybody can rest easy because the NSA's super secret snooping system isn't worth a shit.
Exactly.
So don't worry about it. So it's all a load of bullshit, really.
It's
all
an act.
And it has to be, you know.
Guess what Obama was doing, or was scheduled to do, on the 7th and 8th, so the day after this breaks. He was on his way to China to meet his counterpart, the Chinese president, for discussion roundtable talks on on China's espionage, namely all the spying that the Americans have accused the Chinese of doing on their systems. Then this breaks. The guy's in Hong Kong, and it's all about how the NSA is spying on, well, China's named everybody else, their own people. And so I thought that was interesting as well. I mean, in a way, it does seem that something came from outside to catch the White House with his pants down. But then on the other hand, it's really weird. The Guardian makes very explicit that they contacted the White House itself, the NSA, the Department of Justice, and I think the Department of Defense, the day before they were going to publish this first breaking story, and offered them the right of reply, either within the article and or if there was any sensitive information in the article they were going to publish, would they like to withdraw it, for reasons of national security, blah, blah, blah. They were given 24 hours to do it. And they just said, I don't know what if they responded,
they
but
probably said,
they were handed the story on a platter.
Yeah, and they said, nah, it's okay, go ahead with it. There's nothing. There's nothing
basically
interesting.
This is basically a case of the dog that didn't bark. The Sherlock Holmes story. That obviously they knew about it because they didn't do anything. They knew about it beforehand. They could have stopped it. The Guardian is infamous for basically being the lapdog of the intelligence agencies, and they didn't. And they knew about it, and they sent an email, probably not encrypted, so the NSA didn't even have to decrypt the email that they sent to it. And they knew about it and didn't do anything, which makes me very, very suspicious about the entire situation. It is basically the piece of evidence that I think brings the entire official story crumbling to the ground when it comes to obviously something else is going on because the dog didn't bark in a certain sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from a broad perspective, what's the effect of this story? It's not really going to damage the government. It isn't damaging the government. It's making a lot of people, especially in the U.S. and maybe elsewhere, feel even a little bit more secure or, feel comfortable enough. Well, that's just the way it is. And people are just ignoring it, basically, So I'm struggling to find out what the point of it is, other than sending a message to some people maybe that, this is what we can do, or, letting them know that the NSA is doing this, just repeating, in case you missed the Patriot Act. By the way, we're going to assume the right to read all of your emails and listen to all of your telephone conversations, and there's not much you can do about it. They're happy to put that out there,
This is the scene from The Wizard of Oz. I am the great and powerful Oz. Fear me, tremble.
Yeah,
exactly. And of course, don't look behind the curtain.
What really disgusts
it's like you were saying earlier on, Jay, that it's basically, they're trying to project an aura of power and control, and like I was saying, a lot of people like that, and I don't know.
I wonder if they haven't already got this kind of system in place that haven't even, it's not even named. I mean, it certainly isn't named. If you were to go with it, they probably have technology that goes beyond what they've actually discussed.
They don't need technology. If I had physical access...
The reason I'm going this way is because I think the real value is something that Michael touched on earlier, that they're not particularly. I mean, it is useful. They can go in and home in on one person and blackmail them. They have done that in the past. That guy Spitzer comes to mind. But as a more general function, the reason they throw trillions of dollars at this is because they can get an overview of. They can extract or see whatever way it's represented visually for them. They get an overview of what the mass mind is doing. Is it leaning this way now? Is it going that way? Okay, we're going to need to insert something at point here, and let's see if it can rein them back in a bit. Okay, over here, there's too much chatter about the strange weather. We're going to need to do something here. I mean,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yep. If you look at, trying to think of what happened recently that they don't want us to know about. Well, it's in your face. May was, I think, the coldest month, the coldest May in the Northern Hemisphere for 200-some years.
The 80 gajillion tornadoes, including in places where tornadoes usually never form.
Exactly.
Yeah, right beside me.
The world is coming apart at the seams, and I think they are offering a service to those who are afraid, namely the authoritarian follower types. It's okay. We got this. We got your back.
Yeah, getting back to the thing you were saying, maybe it's an extended version of the thing that, what do you call them, Cliff High from Half Past Human does. You know, the kind of the data mining, or the trends on. He just uses the internet, on what people are talking about across all different websites and forums, etc. But you can imagine that if you saw some value in that you might want to include actual, speech on telephone and emails and all that kind of stuff, and throw all of that in together. If you have some kind of a program that can do the same kind of thing and give you an idea, like you were saying now, of what people are talking about, what they're thinking about, what's coming up in the mass consciousness, and then using that to put things in place to distract from it, or to downplay it, or to negate any sense of an awareness among people about the important things, like what's going on the planet, the weather, etc.
They've freely admitted. What's going on out there? They freely admitted they have, quote, thousands of specialists behind keyboards ready at the drop of a hat to get out there on the social networks and rein people back in. This is what.
But if they are doing this kind of thing, then that's might be what it's really being used for. Because, like we're saying, seriously, recording, Betty Ann's kind of, chat with her best friend about the local, Salvation Army do that they went to. Really,
Yep. There's so much bullshit going on about this. I was watching a Fox News. They have a specialist on, someone who knows, an expert, and a great quote from them. They quite literally can watch your ideas form as you type. Yes, that there's technology that, Google does that. You're typing in your search terms, and Google's sort of predicting where you're going with it. But the idea is planted there is that, oh my God, they know what I'm thinking. And the effect this has on people is that they will self-condition themselves into behaving as they think the authority wants them to. There is no actual need to send out directives and orders and laws and to try and physically contain or physically direct how people should behave.
Yeah, much more effective. Much more effective prison if people are essentially their own jailers in that sense, So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway,
I should head off here. I've got some foreign corresponding to do.
Excellent.
for somebody else. Huh?
All right, dude. We'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks for calling, Joe.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Joe.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
See you soon.
I wanted to touch on something he said. The last thing that he said was the prison for your mind, which is, of course, a quote from Matrix. And that leads to a kind of an interesting little theory that I have. I don't know if it's the truth. It's just an idea. Is that in the movie The Matrix, you realize that there were two matrices. There was the one that was the world of the 90s, And then there was the second matrix, which was for all the people who were battling, quote unquote, the matrix was. And both were created by the machines. And one was to house the people who rejected the first type of reality. And then they could go into the other one, which was harsh and everything. It was what they thought, should really be in, were freedom fighters and all this stuff. And so what if, in a certain sense, what they're creating when they put up these people like Julian Assange and now Edward Snowden is they're creating charismatic personalities for people to latch onto so that they can join the Julian Assange camp and the Edward Snowden camp or whatever. And that basically just helps to give their lives purpose. We're resisting the great imperial machine and all that stuff, where it's just basically another second matrix. And of course, in the matrix, the Council of Elders were actually, in certain senses, some of them were aware that they were in another matrix and that they couldn't escape. That they'd been talked to and explained the nature of things and said, "You're not going to get out." And
yeah, and as I remembered, Morpheus was very reluctant to go there. He really believed that this was their mission.
Yeah,
and he had to break down and to realize that, oh crap, I was wrong.
Yeah,
that reminds me of right now. People are protesting in Hong Kong, Edward Snowden is a hero, and they're out there, and there's agitation is building in his defense.
Right.
In a way, yeah, there should be, people should be
if the
on the side of free information. But it also reminds me of George Orwell's book, where there were protests, that were organized. I can't remember the quote, but the Emmanuel Goldstein movement, which was set up as a kind of, it was one big honey trap. And part of that, people were out on the streets and they're protesting the system. And of course, in the end, everyone knows how the story ends. That was all a ploy to get people to reveal themselves. More to the point, though, it's not so much that we should be afraid to speak our mind and show who we really are, but that battling the matrix in this manner is futile.
Oh yeah, it's pointless.
It's pointless.
It's never succeeded. It's never a successful strategy.
But as a side note, Orwell's book, 1984, has gone up 7,000% on Amazon, the sales, So there were two articles I read, 3,000 up to 7,000% sales increase due to this recent NSA issue.
Yeah.
So, which is an upside.
I'm not sure what to make of that. Are people suddenly getting it, or?
I think that there's a lot more people who get it than we give them credit for. I think there's a lot of people who do get it at some level or not. Go ahead,
Looks like we have a call here.
Let's take it.
Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it says Rich calling from England.
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Rich. How you doing?
Hello, guys. How you doing?
We're still alive.
I'm good, thanks.
Good. Hey, Rich, what's your question or comment?
Well, loving the show. It's a fascinating topic. And, yeah, I like the farce route you're going down when things are coming up. Just whether they can really do that, and whether they're just trying to pretend that they are the all-seeing eye, and everyone should be scared and just shut up and not sort of like trying to create a fear amongst everybody. It's just fascinating.
It's it strikes me as it's psychological operations again.
Mm-hmm.
They take various forms, but they all have the same strategy behind them.
Right.
To get you to believe something that is not true. And it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, here on Sottnet we've been talking about the global police state coming together piece by piece. It's here. It is global. At the same time, though, what can it really do to stop you? It ultimately relies on the control of information. They can't control it. As Jason's explained, the internet by its nature is open.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. They're relying on you to accept that they are all knowing to some extent.
Yep.
And it's like they're playing the role of God or something.
Yep. That's right.
Maybe it's just a scare tactic to scare people away from sharing information.
The thing is the internet could really save humanity in a certain sense if people took that idea of complete openness to heart and stopped trying to be the way they are, and just sort of went with the flow to it. I mean, the quickest way or the best way out of this particular problem that we're in now is actually through it. It's instead of trying to hide yourself, actually come out into the open and proclaim loudly, I don't agree with what the government does. I think that they're doing this. Even if you have a different opinion, than us, it doesn't really matter. If you have different opinions than us, that's cool. Everyone's got an opinion, and we reach a consensus as a race of all humanity, and the internet provides that possibility. But there's something that Leonardo da Vinci once said, which is something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, that it's easier to stop at the beginning than it is at the end. And in this case right now, what's going on with the American government, what's going on with all the world governments, it is easier to set up the defense against it now than it will be later. I mean, if now we look at this and they say they're violating our privacy, and so we try to hide more, we try to encrypt our traffic, we try to do all that stuff, we will end up in a situation where we're no longer able to speak out, and speaking out will actually be kind of worse. But if today, right now, you start openly declaring your dislike and distaste for this is inhuman treatment. I mean, the right to privacy is a fundamental factor of human dignity. It's a human right, and what they're doing, they say, oh, we're just doing it to foreigners. It's like, yeah, but you're violating the human rights of foreign nationals. I mean, how could anybody in the world not be outraged by this idea? It's not acceptable to do it to anyone, period. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that they have the capability doesn't mean that they should. And if people just come out and say, hey, this is messed up and I don't agree with this, and just start saying, just say stuff on Facebook, say stuff on blog, and don't care. And don't care if, whatever. You give the government power by trying to hide things, by trying to hide and conceal from them. You give them the power to ultimately do what the 1984 talks about. And those people in 1984, if you think about it, they got into the position by, saying, oh, well, I'll be able to hide, or I'll be able to do this. But then later on, it was so pervasive and so ubiquitous, the controls, that they could do nothing against it, and it was all a big bunch of a trap, type.
So, in my opinion, the internet is a huge chance in our time, and we should not lose it.
I mean, we should double the traffic on the internet instantaneously by just posting an extra comment every day about how we don't agree with the NSA doing what they're doing, or we don't agree with these particular laws, and just imagine the increase of traffic if everybody on the internet started saying, hey, everyone going to blogs and posting comments and stuff like that. I mean, the NSA's ability to listen and store would be, all of a sudden it would just be horrifying, to them. Yeah, I think that people should just be open.
It's interesting because when I first saw the story breaking, I found it actually just very empowering in terms of, hey, there's this guy, supposedly, who's deep in the belly of the beast, and he's courageously standing out and going very public. So I don't know, whether, the validity of that, but my own personal thought was, well, if you've got a guy there who's not afraid of endangering his life, and he's happy to speak out, given his position, then, why isn't everybody just being public and speaking out? So I don't know whether, that's the impact on myself was actually, to become more outspoken. Actually found it quite empowering in that regard. So I find sort of the PSYOP angle of it and the questions over the validity of Snowden, a bit confusing in that regard. And I like what you say, Jason, about it sort of encourages, the other reaction is to actually close off and, start using alternative systems to communicate, more encryption, hide, hunker down.
Tor.
And that makes people actually easier to target, really. If you're doing something suspicious, then you're going to be using these programs that are even easier to track, PGP, because they're easy to pick up, I would guess. But not sharing.
Right. I mean, you're just going to draw attention to yourself. And like the Snowden guy is promoting Tor, and Tor is a naval intelligence technology. I mean, That's basically that's like letting the fox guard the chicken coop. It's like, I want to hide from the government, so let me use a governmentally created technology. You notice how I coined that word, governmentally? Coined word here. A government created technology to do so. It's totally ridiculous. It's the fox guarding the chicken house when it comes to Tor.
Maybe we should just all invent new words all the time and just totally screw up the data mining.
The data mining will
be like, computer can't process.
Exactly,
Well, I think you could just putting miscellaneous characters and everything I wrote, but then just talking garbage.
Nah. There's another angle on this. Let's say for a moment, this guy Snowden is sincere. We've no reason to believe he isn't. He may have been manipulated into doing this in some ways, or he ultimately is serving someone else's purpose. But I think I would say to you, keep the hope, because it is, on the face of it, a good thing. Even if there's some nefarious reason for it. The thing with the plotting and scheming that goes on is that it backfires all the time. I'm sure you're aware of all the Arab Spring revolutions in the Middle East. The latest is Turkey.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
When Egypt exploded, 2011, I think there was really did catch them by surprise. It wasn't long before, it was managed well enough that the status quo was returned and Egypt remains a client regime of the United States. But the danger of this game that they're playing, if there is a game, is that they think they can manage kind of a controlled burn where, okay, we'll stimulate the protest against us that will actually be our own creation, therefore we'll be able to manage any real mass outbreak of revolution that arises. They're playing a really dangerous game there. Mm-hmm. And I would not condemn people who get agitated enough to not get up in arms, literally, but to channel that anger into actually even just speaking the truth, speaking your mind, and I think if it gives hope and actually moves things along and creates a momentum, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think it was interesting what you were saying about how initially it gave you hope. I think it's actually a very good thing. Whether or not that was actually intended, because maybe this whole thing is supposed to be a distraction from something else. Maybe it's more, as Joe said, that it's it's kind of the same old, and if that's the case, then the reaction of having hope is actually quite good. But to me, the most important thing then is, like we were talking about earlier, if everybody got out there and stopped being afraid or stopped being apathetic, and continued, because if this whole scandal goes away and everyone goes, oh, okay, everything's fine, we can go back to living our lives and everything is normal, and they stop paying attention to what's going on, then temporarily it's a good thing, but it's not lasting. So
I do have kind of something to say on that. I'm not going to read from a book. I have a book here called Fear of Freedom by Carlo Levi, and he is talking about governments who kind of set themselves up as God or some godlike entity that's all-powerful. And he does have a little section in where he talks about rebellion and revolt against them and how they can never succeed as long as the intention of the people is to hate the knife and not the altar that they're being sacrificed on. So to hate things like what the NSA is doing is, oh, that's terrible, but they don't recognize the altar is the problem, the state religion, quote unquote. He uses that terminology, but kind of what he means is what we see in America, where there's sort of like this almost deifying of the state as being all powerful, and the president can just kill people. And they fail and fall because they try to supersede the government in power. They try to replace the government with something like they want to revolt against them because they want to be in that position. And as long as you work in the framework that you have been made to believe about the necessity of the whole system, the necessity of all this stuff, the necessity of the paranoia, the necessity of spying on people, and all this stuff, as long as you believe that kind of schizoidal, psychopathic thinking, that paranoia about everyone, and this misanthropic idea about the intentions of others, as long as you subscribe to that, even though you're trying to say, oh, well, the NSA is the bad ones here and we're going to revolt against them, you're just going to maintain the problem and you will never ever succeed. So when people are going out and saying, what am I really rebelling against in this world? What am I really not liking? And the things that you should not like are the murder and the violence and the intrusion in privacy, the removing of human dignity, the torture, the punishment, the idea of punishing people for being wrong or against your ideas. So, I mean, when that kind of stuff happens, people should stop for a minute and think about what they really want, and to remember that you're going to have to live with these people after you win. If you're a revolutionary, your hope is to win, right? And what are you going to do? Kill everybody? No, of course you're not. You have to live with them. These people are going to be your neighbors. These people are going to be fellow citizens. And if you go into that kind of idea with this thing that you're going to punish or subjugate or win and be right above these people, you're going to have to live with them after the fact, or kill them, or what are you going to do? So, you have to kind of come about this. A violent revolution is never going to be the answer. It will always fail. Even if you win, it will fail ultimately, because all you'll do is create a large area of the population that feels subjugated and dominated by you.
Yeah, that's why I like our Facebook revolution. Can we call it that?
Yeah.
Well, the critics say
dangerous to use the word revolution.
The critics say, but Facebook is a creation of the CIA, and well, it might well be, but the whole internet is a creation of DARPA, the Department of Defense.
Facebook can be a wonderful tool if you use it that way.
Well, the underlying protocols, to be fair, the underlying protocols of the internet, the communications protocols, are somewhat military technology. That is true with ARPANET and things like that. But the internet as a concept is actually an academic creation. It's not a military creation. It's the idea of sharing documents in HTML and browsers and all this stuff.
Okay, we've got another caller, Rich, so we're going to let you go. Thanks for calling in.
That's cool. Cheers.
Okay. Take it easy. Bye.
All righty. Let's take the next call.
All right.
Hi.
Hi. I'd like to find
Hi, caller.
out.
What's your name?
Joe. So.
Hey, Joe.
Okay. Hi. I presume
Hi.
you guys. I presume you people. Go ahead.
Go on. Yeah. No, the floor is yours. Go for it.
All right. I presume you guys are against the NSA taking a look at the metadata, right?
No, we're against anyone who encroaches on the privacy of another.
So that wouldn't include the NSA taking a look at the metadata.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Certainly, any violation of privacy is a violation of a human right. Period.
Okay.
In my opinion, that's just my opinion. Hey, whoa, just my opinion.
All right. So what was it that they had done which had raised your ire?
I don't have any ire.
No ire, but we noticed that it raised the ire of a lot of other people.
Yeah, we're not particularly ire-like about it.
You can't really irate us about something we've been aware of for 10 years or more. But go ahead. What's your question?
Okay, so you're not for the NSA doing this,
nope.
But it hasn't really irritated you.
No, because, they're an intelligence agency. It's been their mandate since, 1954, and before that, with the SIS, the signal guys, and before that, the Black Chamber, and before that, even the Crown, the English Crown, was opening mail coming across the ship. So, this is just something that they've been doing for a very, very long time.
Okay.
Of course, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think that it's good.
All right? But
that's just my personal belief.
Okay, why would you think that it's not good? Do you think that the NSA shouldn't do this, even though they're saying they're doing it to protect us by taking a look at...
I never asked them to protect me.
Okay, so...
And I don't want them to. I don't want their protection. I'd rather get blown up by a terrorist than have their protection.
All right, so you...
I could get hit by a car. Are they going to protect me from that? I could die from an allergic reaction to a drug that got pushed through the FDA too quickly. I could die from that too. Are they going to protect me from everything in the world? From disease, from genetic frailty, from any of these other things. They can't guarantee my protection. They didn't guarantee the protection of the people in the Boston bombing. They didn't guarantee the protection of the 9/11, the people in those buildings. So they're incompetent or impotent, or they're making a promise that they can't deliver on. No. So, fuck them and the horse they rode in on, type of thing.
It's the whole Obama, if you want 100% security, you have to give up some privacy. Well,
the implication
I'd rather have my privacy.
The implication being he is in a position to give you 100% security.
And they're not.
So clearly they're not.
So is your philosophical obstinance based upon their incompetence or based upon the fact that they're doing it?
No, neither. My philosophical obstinance, as you put it, if you use that word, and my obtuseness is based on the fact that I believe privacy is fundamentally a human right. I think that the the development of the individual necessitates the ability to have a private internal world in order to work things out, and I believe people have that as a human right.
Okay, so
and
you believe that the NSA... All right, so you believe the NSA violated it, and you believe that it's because they violated it, and you have a right to privacy, that by itself means that the NSA is doing something morally wrong. Or is it because they're incompetent, or both?
Well, no, I'm not saying necessarily that. I'm just saying that all right, we're covering a whole lot of different premises here, so hold on a second.
What do you think of the NSA and the whole thing?
Yeah, what do you think? It's more about what you think than what I think.
No, I'm going to try to work hard to come up with obtuse answers like you guys.
Yeah, well, no, that's good. It's a good practice for the mind.
We have a radio show and you called in, so, share your opinion.
Yeah, come on, man. It's your podium. It's your soapbox. Go for it.
All right. I don't think that the NSA is doing us any good. I think they're operating on a false premise. I think they're dishonest. So I don't like the fact that they're doing it. I think they're lying to us. But that begs the question. Suppose we really did have real terrorism. I don't think we were under any type of real terrorist threat. But suppose we were. Would the NSA be justified in doing what they're doing?
No.
They would.
No.
It's a faulty premise because there are no, quote, real terrorists.
Well, no, it's not a faulty premise. He's established that the world, we're gonna slice up the world a little bit for 1 second.
Okay.
And say, what if there are?
Okay.
And pretend that they are for a minute, and is it okay then? Right?
That's what I said. Yep.
That's what he said. Under that condition, is what they do okay?
You're asking me?
Yeah, he's asking you too. He's asking all of us here. He's putting us on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem would be to analyze the data, as we discussed in the beginning of the show, which would be a very difficult task. And all they could do, they could isolate the person and maybe the other persons he's in connection with, and maybe they could act on this information. Yeah.
I mean, if we accept the world as they have presented it, right? If you stop for a minute and accept everything that they've presented about the world with the Muslim terrorism and all this different stuff, and you accept that all as being the truth, then you have to make this decision of, in those instances, would what they do be correct? And my answer is absolutely not.
Okay.
It is
That's
still
your answer.
not okay.
Right.
That's my answer.
Right.
My answer is
actually their own answer. The FBI is on record as saying that mass surveillance has had a success rate of 0. All of the so-called terrorists that were revealed to be terrorists in these foiled FBI terror plots were entrapped by regular investigative detective means.
If we erase the conspiracy
mass surveillance had no...
If we erase the conspiracy...
No, that's two different issues, what you're presenting.
Hold on. I want to respond to that, though, real quick, just because of... Even if we erase that, the official story, they have admitted that almost all of the terrorist plots that they have foiled have actually come from information from normal investigative methods of informants and tip-offs, not from the electronic surveillance that the NSA is doing. So even the official story from like the British government and even parts of the U.S. government is, wait a minute, this whole surveillance thing, it actually hasn't contributed, and it's all been tip-offs and informants.
And that's why his particular premise was off. But the thing is, the electronic surveillance, if we had bombings, real bombings in L.A. or in Detroit or in New York that were actually caused by terrorists, small nukes, do you think that this type of surveillance which the NSA is doing and proposing, do you think that would be justified? If we actually did have an attack that was a very bad attack, or even a series of bad attacks? Anybody?
The reason why it's so hard, it's a no-brainer, is because
that's the typical kind of like moral quandary, the old man on the boat type of thing. We've gotten into this sort of restricted moral question, and in that sense,
well, hypotheticals lead to real situations. So I'm giving you a hypothetical.
Well, that real situation has never arisen.
That's why it's a hypothetical which people explore. Anybody?
It's the kind of hypothetical situation that's born from the paranoia that
here's
is spread within
here's
the population.
In other words, you don't want to answer the question because it might be justifying what the NSA might be doing. All right, so who's going to answer it?
Now, I'm going to answer that question because I have thought about this one. And I gave, actually, at one point, I gave a lot of thought to this. And I said, if the world was this bad, I would do what was necessary, but I would expect to be hated for it. And that I should be. I would say that, my moral comfort is not a sufficient price to pay for so many lives. That is true. Like I said, okay, in that case, I would. But I would not expect to be liked for doing it, and I would hope that people would have the wherewithal to realize that what I had done was morally wrong, but pragmatically necessary in the moment. If there is a continuing, if there really was a bomb of that, sort of caliber in Los Angeles, and somebody had like a nuclear weapon and they blew it up, I would say, yes, at this point it is correct to go to the ends of the earth to stop it from happening again. But at what point, if that is the image that is presented about the world, and if that's the truth,
well, that is the image that is presented by the world. It's called reality. Nations are bombing nations. They're having their own CIA, their own secret services doing their own.
Last time a nation was bombed by a nuclear weapon?
Bombed by a nuclear weapon? Might have been Nagasaki.
Yeah. That was they created it and then they never used that shit again. And this whole suitcase bomb thing, it's a farce. And it put in certain moral situations, yes, anybody would do those. And they are manufacturing this situation in order to verify and allow themselves to do it.
But that's why I brought on the hypothetical, in case it was actual, in case we had the Jericho effect, in case we had 3 cities that were bombed by nukes, dirty nukes, that were actually proven to have been done by terrorist nations, what would happen? Now, your answer is that you would accept the NSA taking a look at our particular records. Would you would you impose any conditions on that?
Well, see, hang on a minute, though. I don't think I would answer it that way. I would answer that no. I would say it's not okay for the simple reason that
not. All right.
Let's assume that it's 1930, and there's some massive weapon or something, or let's say 1945. All right. So they had intelligence and everything, but they didn't have the ability to gather all the data and everything like they did today. So basically, the question is, would I allow the government to invade my privacy in
save your life?
in a totally crazy way when, as Neil pointed out with the FBI thing, most of the tips and leads were done by normal
Again, that was done on a false premise relative to electronic surveillance. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I get what he's saying. The thing is what you've done though is kind of like unfair in a certain sense, because
it's a loaded question, a hypothetical in which it might happen.
Yeah,
so I'm just asking a hypothetical question.
But it's the question. It's the question that the government wants all of us to ask ourselves, so that we'll cower in fear and go, "Oh yes, please invade my privacy."
Then you bring in the other situation in that we don't have a real war on terror. So I'm bringing in, as I've already stated 3 or 4 times, a hypothetical in order to see what the mindsets would be.
I mean, this is a common rhetorical trap, basically, because given complete control over reality and a logical question, you can control what a person will answer, because if they answer incorrectly, they are seen as horrible.
Well, how about this? How about if
create a moral situation, basically like, what is it? Jimmy Carr does this in his shows all the time. At the end of his show, he stops because he's really filthy comic, but he is interesting psychologically because he's totally psycho. He does the same kind of thing, which is he puts a moral question.
All right, you don't like the question, and it makes you kind of think. Here are my particular thoughts on it, since you want to give me the floor. Here's the thing. So supposing we did have these 3 bombs, okay, and again, the terrorists were real. For whatever particular reason, they may have been megalomaniacs, or they may have thought that they were responding in kind to America's imperialism. Whatever their particular motivation, it's happened. So would the NSA be right in doing this? I would say yes, under certain conditions. One of those conditions is that if they did find out information about all Americans, because everybody has something to hide, not because it's legally wrong, but not even because it's morally wrong, but just because it's our right to privacy. So the NSA took a look at certain records, and they went beyond the metadata, which I think they're doing now. I think they're fucking liars. So let's say they find out that there are conversations which are embarrassing to millions of people. Whatever is found out that is not part of the investigative process within the context of terrorism is null and void no matter what it is. Now, would anybody there be satisfied with that?
Well, then you can go some places with that, but let's just say that we're satisfied with this one because we got another caller.
Okay.
We appreciate you calling because you've called up several times before. And you
I have. I don't remember calling in this show. Okay.
Oh, Joe from Montana. We've heard all about you before.
Thanks for your call, Joe. We've got another call on the line.
Okay.
We look forward to your calls. So call again next time.
Okay. Take it easy.
Take care, bro. All right,
bye. You too. All righty.
We got another caller?
Next caller. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Paul from U.S.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, just want to make a couple of comments. Actually, I worked in data warehouse applications for a long time. And the recent years, the things that's happening is a little bit concerning to me. The reason is, traditionally, we know that they are basically tapping everything. I think around 2006, some AT&T networking guy whistleblowed saying that NSA tapped into entire data center of networking center of AT&T and started tapping the entire data. So we know that this is for a long time. We know that they are actually going at the source of the data and tapping it. But we don't know how they are using the data. Then I keep hearing this word data mining, data warehouses. Having worked in that field, there are some challenges in any data warehouse or data mining application, which traditionally in business called business intelligence application. You get the source data. The most critical part is tying in the data. That means you have to tie based on the person or customer or something. You have to tie in the different sources of the data, like bank, credit card information, other transactions that you have. That is where the biggest challenge comes in, because there is no one solution, because a person has a name, XYG, YXG, like million types, small caps, all type of things can happen, which really screws up the tying in process.
Right.
Now, this is where actually the recent incidents is a little bit troubling to me. What happened is last 3 years, everybody starts using credit cards and emails. For example, if you have an Android phone, you go to the bank says that, okay, I want to verify whether this one is your phone. So they text some code and they ask you, that code goes to your cell phone, from cell phone it goes back. So basically now suddenly email and cell phone became so central point, you can literally, you can identify a person based on the cell phone and the email address. Now this is where the traditional challenge of the data mining becomes very easier. Now this is where actually traditionally the data warehouses has biggest challenges. If the source data becomes huge, traditionally you need to load it into the database, and databases are not good for huge volumes of data. Now that is where this big data, Hadoop, and these things came into picture for last 2 years. Interestingly, recent Bilderberger's meeting, the Amazon CEO is there, and also the points they discussed is about big data. So something going on, people are started, and also Yahoo recently said that their entire Yahoo database, like emails and everything, is open to the public. I think there are some. I read an article saying that Yahoo's data is pretty much not private as people think. There's some article I read that. So if you tie in both big data and Yahoo data, and we know that that means suddenly the tying in becomes completely easy.
Yeah.
Okay. And the natural question people ask, okay, what are you going to do with the data? Now they have literally everything. They can target people. They can harass them and all that stuff. Why do they need this large scale? But I will put this question a little bit differently. What if somebody asked Najis, what are you doing with all these people and all these things? Would you have heard the word saying that, okay, I'm creating a different race or I'm killing them, all those things? They're not going to say that. Their motivations all will be layered, and each layer have their own hierarchies and all that stuff. So my point I'm trying to say is we will not be knowing the exact ultimate reason why they are doing it. So we can only address saying that what they're doing is right, constitutional, is good for the people or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, thank you for that observation, Rao. That's pretty good. I think that one of the things that is very interesting, because we mentioned it before, was that Google requires you to put in your cell phone number.
Right.
They don't allow like a landline, so that just connects
exactly
you to
true.
all your searches. And with the Amazon, it's connected to your credit card number, so therefore they have all your book purchases. So it's a scary kind of situation. I mean, again, the situation is not so much what the government's doing with it now. Ultimately,
right.
It's what a dishonest person could do with it in the future. That stockpiling the data and tracking it. I mean, if they're doing something totally innocuous right now, that's really kind of irrelevant, because America has a very long history of violating the rights of minorities. I mean, up into the 60s with the Martin Luther King movement. They have a long history of persecuting minorities, like with McCarthyism. So it was only 60 years ago, or not even 60 years ago. It's like 40, 50 years ago, that Americans were doing this. The American government was doing this. That they required black people to give up their seats on the buses. That they were preventing them from voting booths, and this, that, and the other thing. That was a very recent time ago, that they were persecuting homosexuals and communists. I mean, this is very recent in American history, where there are people alive today who were involved in that, morally involved, supporting McCarthyism or not supporting it, and this, that, and the other thing. So what's going to happen in the future with the NSA creates this gigantic, huge place where it stores all the things, and is there going to be a time when somebody in the government, like this Feinstein character, or someone similar, who decides that they're going to persecute all the non-Christians, or they're going to persecute all the Jews? Registration is something that tyrannical governments have always done, and this registering of data is a very sensitive topic, because it gives them access to information that they shouldn't be able to access should they want to do something wrong, but doesn't really and truly provide any intelligence benefit or protection or security from terrorism. So they're saying we need to do this because of terrorism, but they are themselves admitting, and various other governments and various other experts are saying, wait a minute, it hasn't really contributed in any significant way whatsoever to the supposed war on terror, sorry. So I mean, the question is, what are they going to do with the data? And he is right that once everything starts being connected to telephone numbers and credit cards, it becomes a lot easier to consume the information and connect it together. And that is a little bit worrying, actually.
Yeah, recent times you can see every website you go, any blog go, you can log in with Facebook, LinkedIn, Yahoo, right. Google, anything you can link it. And also, even in in cell phones, any application you have to download it, you have to give a blank check to them saying that literally they can do anything. There is some couple of years back, somebody whistleblowed it, and then they said, oh, that's what we are doing. So do it whatever you want, do it. Now, a couple of days back, Robert Mueller clearly said that this is legal and constitutional. It's basically they do whatever they want to do it. If somebody get caught, they say it's legal and constitutional. So if you look at that,
I think it's even true in a certain sense, because I found a ruling of the U.S. Supreme Court from 1979, which was about a regular crime being committed, and a telephone company was used to find actually the person who did the crime. And the Supreme Court ruled that the installation of a surveillance device at the telephone company was not a search within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment, and hence no warrant was required. And the reason for that is that the application of the Fourth Amendment depends on whether the person invoking its protection can claim a legitimate expectation of privacy. So that means, for example, when you're using a telephone to do something, you're not really expecting that the number will stay private, because you have to assume that the telephone company will store it on its computers for various business purposes. And the same goes for Facebook and other social networks. So when you post something on Facebook, for example, you are actually expecting that it's shared and it's public. So that actually this ruling says that for such types of informations, the Fourth Amendment does not apply.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to Facebook, very few people go to Facebook with the expectation of not sharing the information with a group of people. And so therefore, in a certain sense, they are like saying, I'm giving up my Fourth Amendment right by even being on Facebook for the content of Facebook, obviously. I mean, if a person does implement strong security procedures on Facebook, then they are actually saying, hold on a minute, I want privacy even though I'm on Facebook. In that case, they could argue that. But here's the real kicker about the whole FISA warrant thing, is that the companies that receive the warrant are not permitted to disclose that they received it. So there is no way for an end user whose privacy has been violated to ever bring an action against the government. And in 2008, one of these services supposedly went to the FISA court and tried to do this whole contesting the warrant, and they claim it was Yahoo. I don't know if that's true, because I got a copy of the redacted report from it right here. And basically what ended up happening is they contested the warrant from the FISA court, and then basically FISA said that, okay, you can contest it, which they did, but at the same time you still have to comply with it, and if you won't, you'll be held in civil contempt of court, which of course is something that a company doesn't want to be. So they made them do it anyway, and then they went to the FISA court review on behalf of their customers, and they were still shot down, and it was still reaffirmed, basically, that the warrant was completely and totally legal. So that was an instance, supposedly, of one of these telecom companies, one of these internet service companies, actually trying to defend the rights of their customers, and they're gagged to be able to talk about it. So this kind of creates a very interesting problem, because you have people whose privacy is perhaps being violated, perhaps not, but they have no way to contest it. They have no way to, they have to be able to show that a crime has been committed, but the company's not allowed to release that their privacy has been violated. No one's going to get this information, so you're kind of like in this situation where, what are you going to do?
And they started bending the laws in the 70s already.
Yeah, I mean, they started bending the laws even before that, actually.
I look at it this way. They want to do it. They know how to do it. They will do it. Just it's a matter of public relations.
Right.
Look at so much Republicans, Democrats, literally corrupting entire political system, entire judiciary system, entire police system. So literally everything is corrupted. So it's just a matter of if people cry more, they will come up with something to pacify them. Because even if the judiciary also the same thing. One judge says, okay, this is good, and the judge comes says, this is bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is right or wrong?
Here's a scoop for you, Paul. Yeah. The judge who issued the FISA court order for Verizon on April 25th this year was the same judge who struck down Obamacare in 2011 on a technical point, and who has been celebrated by the entire Tea Party movement as stopping the mad democratic regime in its tracks.
Yeah.
His name is...
That's true.
I'm gonna look for his name. Judge Verizon or something? Kevin Verizon?
I mean, these people
are the same guy. I mean...
It's all an act in Washington. You know, I mean...
Okay, Paul, thanks for your call. We're going to wrap up here. It's getting late.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
So on our, we have a little chat on our Blog Talk Radio page, and several of the listeners were making some comments about the call from Joe from Montana and
his hypotheticals.
His hypothetical scenarios. And
hypothetically speaking, if I was...
I just wanted to clarify the point that I was trying to make, which is that when you think about someone like, well, I was going to say Sherlock Holmes, but he's a fictional character, so let's just stick with a detective. Someone gets murdered, right? Maybe the person is your husband or wife, right? So it's, you're obviously very emotionally invested, just as you would be if there was, some massive terrorist attack or whatever. So someone close to you is murdered, and a detective comes along, and they investigate the crime, and they find the person that did it, and hopefully that person is, whatever the justice system does, and, justice is done in some way, blah, blah, blah. Well, that might be a story for another show, the justice system, but let's just, So in that case, the detective doesn't have to go and surveil every single person in the entire country. The detective doesn't have to go and interrogate every single person in the entire country. There is evidence. And this evidence points to who may have done the crime, at which point they collect more evidence until they collect enough evidence to say, okay, this person most likely did it, at which point there's a trial, and of course, one would hope that everything is done properly, and there you go. So when you amplify the situation and you say, oh, well, it's a terrorist attack, to say, yes, I would allow the NSA to, invade my privacy and surveil like the entire planet is kind of idiotic because, I mean, in the case of 9/11, we pretty much more or less know that the official story is BS. And how do we know this? Well, we wrote a book on it called 9/11: The Ultimate Truth.
Yeah, and you
collect the evidence. You don't have to. So for me, it was kind of like the whole point of the theoretical question was actually part of the problem of the government wanting you to basically give up your freedoms in this, it's like they come and they corner you and they say, be afraid. And you're supposed to go, oh, yes, please, protect me. And it's entirely unnecessary if the system works as it should work, which of course it doesn't. And that's the problem.
Well, this is one of the reasons why the old Greek philosophers like Socrates and all of these different guys, they really hated the rhetoricians, the sophists, they called them, because they had developed a series of arguments that would guarantee that they would win by creating situations that were so restricted that the person had to answer what you expected or else look bad. By restricting the situation of there's a nuclear bomb is exploding and therefore millions of people are dying, and you were 100% sure that if the NSA did this, it would solve the problem, would you still not let them? And then you look like an asshole if you don't. It's a rhetorical construct to manipulate people.
And you feel it. I mean, I certainly felt like, hang on a minute, I'm being manipulated here. I think that in the modern speak, we call it niggy sob. Now I've got you son of a bitch. You set someone up to say the very thing that, is going to condemn them to to being wrong or to.
But I mean, here's the question that he posed anyway. If you were to rephrase what he said into absurd proportions, he would say, if you could push a button and save 2 million people from dying horribly, would you do it? Yes or no? Because that's basically what he's asking. Would you just push a button? You don't have to do anything. Or would you let somebody push a button or something like that? He's creating the situation where there's such a huge price for not doing it that he's basically saying that terrorists are going to set off bombs in all the American cities and kill hundreds of millions of people if you don't do this. And that's a ridiculous...
It's ridiculous because it's a hypothetical born of a simplified world.
It's schizoidal.
It's the Jack Bauer is going to save the city if he can just get the right information by torturing this guy.
Yeah.
Problem there, people. Jack Bauer was a fictional character. 24 was a TV show. The real FBI people have gone on the record and said, torture sucks. We never, ever get the information we want. The only time it's been successful is when they've tortured a guy almost to death, and he's come out with the information that they then justify to go and foil other fake terror plots, knowing full well that the information that they were given was inaccurate, because the guy was saying whatever was necessary for them to stop torturing him.
The only reason that they even do torture at all, which the FBI does do torture, they do torture, but they never do it to get information. They do it just to let people know that they do it. I mean, they want it out so that people will fear them. And those people who are kind of weak-willed will say, like, well, I don't want to be tortured, so I'll turn informant. The threat of torture is more important than the torture itself, because there's a lot of people who've talked about it say that most people, they feel so guilty that eventually at a certain point inside the torture, they actually feel like they deserve it. And a lot of people will resist it even or accept it. And, you know, it's not a useful and productive activity. It's just basically inhumane. It's pointless and inhumane.
I have enough to deal with trying to, you know, analyze and cope with the objective world that, you know, hypothetical scenarios are...
It's unfair. I mean...
They're fun, but, you know...
There's a Jewish proverb, not proverb, but saying that says, for instance is not proof type of thing. And I would say that hypothetically speaking is irrelevant. You know, anybody can create a hypothetical world and get anybody to say anything that they want, and that's not really fair. That's not productive in the argument. As the world is today, and what is even being presented, and the level of terrorism that has happened, which is almost nobody dies in the world of terrorism. I mean, 2,500 people supposedly die every day of heart disease. That's almost as many people as died on one day on September 11th. I mean, that's a big, serious problem. 36,000 children die every year from preventable diseases because they have lack of access to health care. I mean, these are serious problems that we know are being caused by things like Monsanto and by big government and biogenetics and GMO stuff and vaccines. We know that they're the ones causing that. So, I mean, no terrorist in the world could kill as many people or is killed when somebody at the FBI signs a piece of paper that allows Monsanto to do this, or some drug company to put this untested drug on it, or, you know, I mean, more people are killed by the government every day because of those things than any terrorist with any bomb anywhere can do, even in a year, even the worst terrorist attack.
I think we should probably start to wrap this show up. It's getting late where we are.
Yeah, it is getting pretty late.
In terms of what's really going on here, well, we've discussed a few cross purposes at work. I should give mention also to another whistleblower whose trial began just as this news was breaking. Bradley Manning, of course, that's disappeared off the front pages. Here's a guy who thought he was doing right, and they're making a serious example of him. You know, don't speak up. Of course, there's the political shenanigans going on, and we touched on that too. The fact that Obama was going to China to berate them about spying on the U.S. And for being the world's leading source, allegedly, of cyber warfare tactics.
Right.
I mean, the Chinese are accused of basically being the source of all spam.
Right.
They're accused of hacking U.S. networks all the time. There are several cases going back 10 years where they're what I call false flag cyber warfare attacks, and they've actually been traced back to servers in the UK and the US.
Yeah.
But they were pinned on Iran, North Korea,
of course,
China. So there's that to think of as well. We also touched on the bigger picture in terms of what's going on with our climate. I mean, the world's coming apart, it seems, economically. The extremes in the environment that are more and more people cannot miss, because when it's snowing where you are and it's supposed to be 30 degrees, you know something's up.
Or when one day it's 30 degrees and the next
day it's 17.
Yeah, and
which we experienced recently.
I mean, it's all the emperor's new clothes type of thing, and everyone's sitting there arguing over, no, his clothes are blue, no, they're purple.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so beautiful. Look, it's made with silk. No, it's not made with silk. It's made with linen and stuff like that. And somebody needs to point out, hold on, all that stuff is irrelevant. The emperor has no clothes, and the American economy is tanking. The world economy is shit. This G8 summit where they're like, oh, a new trade agreement with America. Trade for what? both countries import more than they export already. They're getting everything from China. You know, I mean, a trade agreement between them is how many, you know, Chinese goods can we exchange?
In terms of any grand plan, well, I don't know. I think some people would like to think they're in on the grand plan. In 1997, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force predicted that within 3 years, so by the year 2000, quote, we shall be capable of finding, tracking, and targeting virtually in real time any significant element moving on the face of the earth. And he was not just talking about people, he was talking about everything. Sensors to monitor the environment, RFID chips in all products. That this was the ultimate goal. This was the plan. To transform it and then mesh it within a closed system of total information awareness to cover, track, and gaze omnisciently over all flows, mobilities, and transactions, and attempt to gain some degree of mastery over the unpredictability of global flows. Now that's the megalomaniacal, the psychopathic, I will rule the world. That's the expression of the psychopathic. A closed system.
Yeah.
I can see all of what they do. I can master the information and manipulate them.
I can be in control.
Running against that is something that is fundamentally different. Human beings share information. Right. By our nature, we share.
Right.
By our nature, we are open source.
Yeah.
By our nature, we program each other and our computers to be open source because we understand that all the gifts that we have are built on the gifts of our ancestors before us, the inventors before us who gave us computers, computer technology, these amazing programs we use.
Everything that you use to sell and make money online is created by people who gave those creations away for the betterment of humanity. Every single thing that you use to distribute your pay for videos, your books, all that stuff online is invented by people who gave it away for free and never asked for a cent. And you don't even know their names. The majority of the people who use the internet do not know the names of the people who created the technologies that underpin all of your credit card transactions because they did it for free and they never asked for credit.
So I say let them eat data. Let them have as much data as they want. Give them everything.
Yeah.
The psychopathic mind processes information in a different way. It's like living in a 2D world. They can hear the words, but they can't hear the music. Exactly. We are in two realities that in a fundamental way they never meet. So give them all the data they want.
Give them what they want.
They don't understand you anyway. They can't hear you.
And they don't know what they're asking.
Let them eat data. I like that line, actually.
Yeah, let them eat data.
So, I think on that note,
copious reams.
On that note, we'll say good night and good day.
Good night and good luck.
And good morning, depending on where you are on this little blue planet. Mm-hmm. And do tune in next week, same time, same place, for Sott Talk Radio. Over and out.